council come to order, please join me in the Pledge of Allegiance.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Mandy, would you please call the roll?
DeYoung.
Here.
Reindeerhorst.
Here.
Vanstra.
Here.
Carlstone.
Here.
Hopkins.
Here.
Spore. Here.
All right, just quickly, for if you're attending via the phone, you will be able to provide verbal comments during the dedicated public forums and public hearings. I would ask that in the meantime, please mute your microphones or telephones until the time you wish to speak. Can I get approval of the consent agenda with the note consent agenda item D4A, setting the budget approval public hearing date has been pulled from the agenda and will be placed on the March 1 consent agenda. Do I have a motion for approval of the tentative agenda as amended?
So moved.
Support.
Vanstra, Spore, any discussion? Okay, all in favor, please say yes. Opposed, no. Mandy, please call the roll.
Vanstra.
Yes.
Spore.
Yes.
DeYoung.
Yes.
Reindeerhorst.
Yes.
Carlstone.
Yes.
Hopkins.
Yes.
All right, motion passed. Okay, so I'm going to do things a little different tonight. There's a lot of people here. I assume that maybe I'm wrong to assume, but I assume there's quite a few who want to address us about the library. And so normally at this time we have a public forum to address agenda items. What I'd like is for, if you have any other agenda item other than that, to make your comment now, and then we'll go through our business meeting. We have a policy and planning with the ambulance service, and then prior to going to our policy and planning meeting discussion, we will have a special time of comment concerning the library. Okay? I think that'll be easier to flow through the agenda tonight. And so there will be, I think it'll be better because comments will be fresh in our minds when we start that discussion. So there'll be ample opportunity for everybody to comment prior to us going into that policy and planning.
I just went over here. Here, it was muted.
Please mute your microphone, who's ever on. So at this time, if there's anyone that wishes to address any other agenda item, you could come forward. Please state your name and address, and try to limit your comments to 3 minutes. Okay, we'll move on. Approval of consent agenda. Can I get a motion for approval?
So moved.
Support.
DeYoung, Branderhorst, any discussion? Okay, all in favor, please say yes. Opposed, no. Mandy, please call the roll.
DeYoung.
Yes.
Reindeerhorst.
Yes.
Vanstra.
Yes.
Carlstone.
Yes.
Hopkins.
Yes.
Spore.
Yes.
Motion passed. Okay, we're going to go into a public hearing regarding the fiscal year 2023 maximum property tax dollars. Mike?
Yes, Mr. Mayor, I'd be happy to explain this item. For those following at home, I'm on slide number 2 this evening. As Mayor DeWard stated, what tonight's public hearing is about is setting the max property tax levy for fiscal year 23. And as council is aware, when we talk about fiscal year 23, we're actually talking about the fiscal year that would start on July 1st of this year and extend till June 30th of 2023. The maximum property tax levy dollars that we're talking about for this fiscal year is just over $6.3 million. Now, it is a particular note, when we talk about the city's overall tax rate, what is being proposed is to maintain the city's overall levy rate at $10.20 per $1,000 of assessed valuation. A little bit of the breakdown of that $10.20 is the operating portion is just over $10.02, with the debt service levy at 17 cents. Now, it is important to note for council's consideration, and one thing that we will be discussing during our budget work sessions, which are scheduled for next week, is under Iowa law that city council could raise the maximum operating levy up an additional 80 cents if you chose to do so. Doing so would increase the annual tax for a $200,000 home by nearly $90 and generate roughly an additional $500,000 in annual property taxes. We're not proposing to do that. We just wanted to bring it to the council's attention on that, and we're going to be talking more about what we call the operational room levy that we have available as we look and forecast out for additional years past the year 2023. So in summary, Mr. Mayor, staff is recommending approval of this resolution, which would keep our overall levy rate at $10.20 for the upcoming budget year. It is important to note, since the proposed tax revenues exceed 102% of the current year collections, I believe we're actually at $2.34%. That also includes new growth and new valuations in as well, on this as well. We will need to have, the proposed resolution will need to be approved by a supermajority of the council, so it's 5 of the 6 members will need to be supportive of this as well. So with that, Mr. Mayor, I believe that concludes staff's presentation. Be more than happy to answer any questions the mayor and council may have on this item.
All right, thank you, Mike. Mandy, any written comments received?
No written comments.
Any comments from anyone on council?
I just have a curiosity question. If you don't get 2/3 majority, does it revert back to last year's?
Well, I think from a practical standpoint, Corey, correct me if I'm wrong, if we don't get a 2/3, what we'll defer to is we'll go through the budget work session. We'll have in-depth discussions, and then we'll come back and conduct the same public hearing again in March on what council decides to establish. So,
Okay, anybody else? Any audience member have a comment about this subject? All right, I'll entertain a motion to close the public hearing.
So moved.
Support.
Answer, Brandenhorst, any discussion? All in favor, please say yes. Opposed, no. Mandy, please call the roll.
DeAnstruck.
Yes.
Vanderhorst.
Yes.
Carlstone.
Yes.
Hopkins.
Yes.
Score.
Yes.
DeYoung.
Yes.
Motion passed. Resolution number 6389 entitled Resolution Approving Fiscal Year 2023 Maximum Property Tax Dollars. Can I get a motion for approval?
Support.
Hopkins, Spore, any discussion? Okay, all in favor, please say yes. Opposed, no. Mandy, please call the roll.
Hopkins.
Yes.
Score.
Yes.
DeYoung.
Yes.
Vanderhorst.
Yes.
DeAnstruck.
Yes.
Carlstone.
Yes.
Motion passed. Special event permit request for Deja Vu consignments anniversary. Mike?
yes, Mr. Mayor, as Mayor DeWard stated, Deja Vu Consignments located at 630 Washington Street is requesting a special event permit for Friday, February 18th. It is important to note they are celebrating their 8th year anniversary. Now, as a particular note, in case of inclement weather, a rain date is scheduled for a snow day potentially of Tuesday, February 22nd. Now, the promoter is proposing to host a food truck on the lot. On there, a little bit of the background or the details of the event as well. It is important to note, Mr. Mayor, all departments have reviewed this application. The fee and insurance certificate have been received by city staff, and we are recommending approval this evening. So with that, that concludes our presentation this evening.
Okay, thanks, Mike. Can I get a motion for approval?
So moved.
Support.
Vanderhorst, DeYoung, any discussion? Okay, all in favor, please say yes. Opposed, no. Mandy, please call the roll.
Vanderhorst.
Yes.
DeYoung.
Yes.
DeAnstruck.
Yes.
Carlstone.
Yes.
Hopkins.
Yes.
Score.
Yes.
Motion passed. Special event permit request for Pella Opera House unspoken concert bus parking. Mike?
Yes, Mr. Mayor, I'd be happy to explain this item. And for those following at home, I'm on slide number 4 this evening. As Mayor DeWard stated, the Pella Opera House is requesting a special event permit for Friday, March 25th, and specifically what they're looking to do is reserve 10 parking spaces on East First Street. And it's just red highlighted area as far as parking spaces that are being requested this evening. It's important to note that all departments have reviewed the application this evening. The insurance certificate has been received, and we are recommending the approval of this, but it is important to note that the fee is still pending, and the staff recommends actually conditional approval this evening, pending receipt of the fee from the Pella Opera House. So with that, Mr. Mayor, that concludes our presentation. Be more than happy to answer any questions the mayor and council may have on this item.
Okay, thanks, Mike. So the motion is to approve it or conditionally approve it pending receipt of the fee. Everybody understand that? Okay, so can I get a motion for approval?
So moved.
Support.
Young, Brandenhorst, any discussion? Okay, all in favor, please say yes. Opposed, no. Mandy, please call the roll.
DeYoung.
Yes.
Vanderhorst.
Yes.
DeAnstruck.
Yes.
Carlstone.
Yes.
Hopkins.
Yes.
Score.
Yes.
Motion passed. Resolution number 6390 entitled Resolution Temporary Closing Public Ways or Grounds in Connection with a Special Event Known as Pella Opera House Unspoken Concert Bus Parking. Mike?
I don't have any additional
Oh,
comments,
that's
sir.
the same. Okay.
So I'd like to be more than happy, and there are questions on the resolution or the pay of parking spaces, but once again, it is 10 parking spaces
Okay.
that they're requesting to close.
Can I get a motion for approval?
So moved.
Brandon Horace Hopkins, any discussion? All in favor, please say yes. Opposed, no. Mandy, please call the roll.
Vanderhorst.
Yes.
Hopkins.
Yes.
Spore.
Yes.
DeYoung.
Yes.
Danstruck.
Yes.
Carlstone.
Yes.
All right, special event permit request for Robe Spring Classic. Mike?
Oh, yes, Mr. Mayor, I'd be happy to explain this item. Zealous Racing is requesting a special event permit request to host the Robe Spring Classic, which is a self-supported bicycle race. The event is preliminary, being proposed to be held on Saturday, April 23rd from 10 a.m. to 3 p.m. Now, it is a little bit of the details of the race, and we also have a map of the overall route of the race as well. It is important to note that the promoter is requesting closure of 4 parking spaces on Franklin Street, which we do have highlighted on the slide as well. Equally important to note that the promoter is not requesting any street closures for this. And finally, Mr. Mayor, it is important to note that all departments have reviewed this application this evening. The insurance fee and insurance certificate and fee have been received. And city staff is recommending approval this evening.
Okay, thank you, Mike. Can I get a motion for approval?
So moved.
DeYoung and Hopkins. Any discussion? All in favor, please say yes. Opposed, no. Mandy, please call the roll.
DeYoung.
Yes.
Hopkins.
Yes.
Spore.
Yes.
Vanderhorst.
Yes.
Danstruck.
Yes.
Carlstone.
Yes.
Okay, moving on to resolution number 6391, entitled Resolution Temporary Closing Public Ways and Grounds in connection with a special event known as Robe Spring Classic. That's the 4 parking spots there. Can I get a motion for approval?
Support.
Hopkins, Spore, any discussion? Okay, all in favor, please say yes. Opposed, no. Mandy, please call the roll.
Hopkins.
Yes.
Spore.
Yes.
DeYoung.
Yes.
Vanderhorst.
Yes.
Danstruck.
Yes.
Carlstone.
Yes.
Motion passed. Designation of official newspaper, Mike?
Thanks, Mr. Mayor. I'd be happy to explain this item. As Mayor DeWard stated, we are considering the designation of the city's official newspaper. For those following at home, I'm on slide number 6 this evening. And as just background information on this request for this appointment, Iowa Code does require cities to designate your official newspaper on an annual basis. We discussed this item during the policy and planning on February 1st, and during that session, the City Council did express the desire to change from the Des Moines Register to the Marion County Express on this as well. And what we're proposing to do this, but we believe that the Marion County Express can legally become the city's newspaper right around June 1st of this year. What we're proposing to do is designate the following publications or newspapers as our legal publications. The Des Moines Register through May 31st of this year. Marion County Express would be effective on June 1st of this year, and they would extend through December 31st, 2022 with this as well. So I believe that, in summary, completes our presentation this evening. Mr. Mayor, I'd be more than happy to answer any questions the Mayor and Council may have on this item.
Okay, thanks, Mike. Can I get a motion for approval?
So moved.
Support.
Brandon Horst DeYoung, any discussion? Okay, all in favor, please say yes. Opposed, no. Mandy, please call the roll.
Vanderhorst.
Yes.
DeYoung.
Yes.
Danstruck.
Yes.
Carlstone.
Yes.
Hopkins.
Yes.
Spore.
Yes.
Motion passed. Resolution number 6392, entitled Resolution Accepting the Fiscal Year 2021 Annual Audit. Mike?
Yes, Mr. Mayor. Once again, I'd like to direct the council's attention to the big board on this item, and I have a few brief comments on the 2021 audit. Then we'll turn it over to our representative from Van Mon and Associates. But specifically what this resolution would do would accept the city's fiscal year 2021 audit report. That would be the fiscal year that ended on June 30th, 2021. Some very brief highlights of the audit report. It is important to note anytime you read an audit report, you always want to start in with the opinion on the audit report. In this case, it was an unmodified opinion was given on the financial statements. That's usually, for those that are familiar with audit reports, it usually means the same as an unqualified opinion, which means the financial statements were presented in accordance with generally accepted accounting principles, as well as governmental accounting standards as well. Overall, when we look at the city's net position, that would be assets minus liabilities, we're just over $119 million. And we have a little bit of descriptions up here as far as governmental activities as well as business type activities as well. Now, it is important to note one of the key things that's always viewed, and this is particularly by a bond counsel, as well as the credit rating agencies. They always like to take a look at funding and fund balances. At June 30th of last year, we had an unassigned fund balance in their general fund of just over $3.6 million. That was actually at 47%, but if you recall, we also have our COVID-19 money that we're still holding on to. We're trying to decide. We will be having discussions on spending that and how that would be appropriated. So right now, our fund balance is a little higher than normal, but that's generally the reason for that as well. And so, Mr. Mayor, if it's all right, I'd like to go ahead and turn it over to Ms. Melanie Myers of Van Monen Associates to give her presentation to the county, to the council rather, on the 2021 audit report.
Thank you, Mike. Melanie, the floor is yours.
All right, thank you. Yes, thanks to the council for engaging our services again. The accounting staff at the city is always very helpful and very professional. We appreciate them. So yeah, we won't go through a lot of numbers tonight. We'll just kind of hit some highlights on the report. As Mike stated, we issued an unmodified report opinion. So in all material respects, the city's financial statements are correct. The other report that we issue is on internal control and compliance. So we go through and we look at the city's processes, their controls, just to make sure there's adequate checks and balances set up. And we did not find any issues with how those are established or how they are working. And then the other piece of that report is the compliance. So we go through and make sure state and federal regulations are being followed, and we had no issues there either. The only comment that we did have in our report was that the telecommunication fund is at a deficit balance for the year ended. That's expected in the first year as Pella Fiber is getting started, so we expect that will turn around, but that's the only required finding that we had as well. Any questions?
Anybody have any questions? I'm sure you'll port through that 95-page audit report. So if you have any questions based on your study of that. It's thick.
Oh, yeah.
Okay, thanks, Melanie.
All right, thanks.
So, let's see, we've got a motion for approval, right? Oh, no, we need a motion for approval. So resolution number 6, to accept the audit, so I need a motion for approval.
So moved.
Support.
Vance for Brandenhorst, any discussion? Gail?
Calvin, did you read it all?
Mhm.
Very good.
I did.
I'll bet you did.
Okay, all in favor, please say yes. Opposed, no. Mandy, please call the roll.
DeAnstruck?
Yes.
Branderhorst?
Yes.
Carlstone?
Yes.
Hopkins?
Yes.
Moore?
Yes.
Dion?
Yes.
Motion passed. Resolution number 6393, entitled Resolution Authorizing the Setting of a Hearing on a Proposal to Transfer Real Property Owned by the City of Pella, Iowa to the Pella Community School District. Mike?
Yes, Mr. Mayor, I'd be happy to explain this item. For those following at home, I'm on slide number 8 this evening. And in essence, what this resolution is doing is just simply establishing the public hearing date as March 1st for considered transfer of North Caldwell Park to the Pella Community School Districts. Shown on this slide is the picture of the area that the city is proposing to transfer to the Pella Community School District as a gift. If you recall, the school district during the recent bond referendum expressed a desire about building new tennis courts on the site and actually additional parking for the school district as well. Proposed transfer would accommodate that desire by the Pella Community School District. Overall, it's roughly 7.3 acres as well. Now, it is important to know we'll be talking about more details on the proposed transfer on March 1st of this year, but as far as the tennis courts are concerned and the replacement of the current tennis courts that we have down here, they would still be open to the general public. This would be the new tennis courts when they're not being used by the Pella Community School District. And that's very similar to how the current tennis courts are currently being operated by both the City of Pella and the Pella Community School District as well. So once again, all we're simply asking tonight, and this is what this resolution does, this approves March 1st as the public hearing date for considered proposed gift to the Pella Community School District of 7.3 acres of North Caldwell Park for their purpose to build new tennis courts on this site. So with that, Mr. Mayor, that concludes our presentation. I'd be more than happy to answer any questions the Mayor and Council may have on this item.
All right, thank you, Mike. Can I get a motion for approval?
So moved.
Support.
Brandenhorst Young, any discussion? Okay, all in favor, please say yes. Opposed, no. Mandy, please call the roll.
Vanderhorst.
Yes.
DeYoung.
Yes.
DeAnstruck.
Yes.
Carlstone.
Yes.
Hopkins.
Yes.
Score.
Yes.
So, motion passed. So we will have further discussion on March 1 about this particular issue. Okay, resolution number 6394, and resolution approving participation in the Mid-Iowa Planning Alliance for Community Development for fiscal years 2022 and 2023. Mike?
Yes, Mr. Mayor, we'd be happy to explain this item. As Mayor DeWard stated, what this resolution would do would approve the city's membership in the Mid-Iowa Planning Alliance. It is important to note that this organization does support economic development activities in Boone, Dallas, Jasper, Marion, Polk, Story, and Warren counties. Now, a little bit about the program, or actually the membership and the benefits of the membership for the City of Pella is up on the big board as well. Now, as far as the city's membership fees are concerned, they're at $1,962 as well. And from a staff's perspective, we believe that this will help foster economic development, and we believe their services could be a benefit to the City of Pella as well. We are recommending approval of the resolution this evening, and with that, Mr. Mayor, that concludes our presentation. Be more than happy to answer any questions the Mayor and Council may have on this item.
Okay, thanks, Mike. Can I get a motion for approval?
So moved.
DeYoung, Hopkins, any discussion?
This be what we call the COG for our area, Council of Governments, or not?
No, it's just purely a planning alliance, so.
So I've been part of the process of setting this up. So the 7-county area, it was interesting when we first started talking about a map of most of the United States. Those 7 counties in Middle Iowa were the only ones not involved in one of these. And it's just that it opens up possibilities of grants and more of that type of stuff. So I think it's good, and it's not expensive to be a member. So now an entity had to be created, and all that's been done. It's set up, and it's ready to start operating. Okay, anything else? Okay, all in favor, please say yes. Opposed, no. Mandy, please call the roll.
DeYoung.
Yes.
Hopkins.
Yes.
Score.
Yes.
Vanderhorst.
Yes.
DeAnstruck.
Yes.
Carlstone.
Yes.
Motion passed. Resolution number 6395, entitled Resolution Ordering Construction of the Furnishing of 15 kV medium voltage power cable and fixing a date for the hearing thereon, and taking of bids therefore. Mike?
Yes, Mr. Mayor, once again, I'd like to direct the council's attention to the big board for a very brief presentation on this item. And the takeaway from tonight's resolution is what we're simply asking the council to do is establish April 5th as the public hearing date for this project, and also authorize staff to take bids for this project as well. Mayor DeWard stated what we're planning to do is replace the conduit and the cables, the electrical cables that we have here listed up on the big board. We're going to be replacing the cables, in-house staff labor with our distribution crew on it. And so this project is just material only, but it is important to know we view it as a reliability project for the electric utility as well. Randy, if we can go ahead, please. Now, if council were to approve this resolution, we would actually conduct our bid letting on March 22nd of this year. And April 5th would be the public hearing date established at council to consider the bids and actually consider awarding the contract as well. Now, we believe the estimated cost for these materials is just shy of $265,000. In the current budget, we have right around $280,000 budgeted for this project. So, Mr. Mayor, that concludes our presentation. Be more than happy to answer any questions the mayor and council may have on this item.
All right. Thank you, Mike. Can I get a motion for approval?
Move.
DeYoung, Hopkins, any discussion, questions? Any electricians in the group? All right, all in favor, please say yes. Opposed, no. Mandy, please call the roll.
DeYoung.
Yes.
Hopkins.
Yes.
Score.
Yes.
Vanderhorst.
Yes.
DeAnstruck.
Yes.
Carlstone.
Yes.
Okay, moving on, resolution number 6396, entitled Resolution Approving Ordering the Preparation of Plans and Specifications, Form of Contract, Notice of Hearing, and Notice of Letting, setting date for public hearing, authorizing the taking of bids, and authorizing bid opening for the Boss Landon Drive reconstruction project. Mike?
Yes, Mr. Mayor, once again, I'd like to refer the council's attention to the big board. For those following at home, I'm on slide number 12 this evening. And as Mayor DeWard stated, what we're talking about is the proposed Boss Landon Drive reconstruction project. We do have the highlighted area showing up on the big board. This is for the western half of Boss Landon that butts up or actually connects to County Highway T15. It is important to note that if council were to approve this resolution, we would conduct a public hearing on this project on March 15th of this year as well. Mandy, let's go ahead, please, and show the key dates on the project. We do have an opinion of probable cost by our engineers of just shy of rather $618,000. Some critical dates that we will hold on this project. Council were to approve this resolution, we would actually conduct a bid letting for the project on March 3rd this year. And then hopefully, if everything goes well, we would have a contract for council to consider on March 15th. If council were to approve this project, we would actually issue a notice to proceed on the project on April 10th of this year. Now, as far as completion dates, generally speaking, we've targeted 40 working days on that, but of course, that's always dependent on weather as well. So please keep that in mind. And I believe that concludes our presentation this evening, Mr. Mayor. But once again, all we're simply asking the council to do is establish the public hearing date for March 15th of this year.
All right, thank you, Mike. Can I get a motion for approval?
So moved.
Support.
Hopkins, for. Any discussion? Okay, all in favor, please say yes. Opposed, no. Mandy, please call the roll.
Hopkins.
Yes.
Spore.
Yes.
DeYoung.
Yes.
Reindeerhorst.
Yes.
Stanstrand.
Yes.
Carlstone.
Yes.
Motion passed. Resolution number 6397, entitled Resolution Approving Ordering Preparation of Plans and Specifications, Form of Contract, Notice of Hearing, and Notice of Letting, Setting Date for Public Hearing, Authorizing the Taking of Bids, and Authorizing Bid Opening for the 250th Avenue Reconstruction Project.
Thanks, Mr. Mayor. For those following at home, I'm actually on slide number 14 this evening, and as Mayor DeWard stated, what we're considering is the 250th Avenue Reconstruction Project. This is the county line road between Marion and Mahaska County, and this would be the road just north of Vermeer Road on the county line. It is highlighted in the red highlighted area that we have up there on the big board. Now, we do have a description of the proposed improvement that we are considering this evening, or actually that we'll be considering on March 15th. Mandy, if you could please advance to slide number 15. It is important to note the engineer's opinion of probable cost is just under $430,000. If council were to approve this resolution, we would, very similar to our previous project, we would conduct a bid letting on March 3rd of this year and actually have the public hearing on March 15th. Very similar time period to the Boss London Drive reconstruction project. We'd be looking to issue a notice to proceed right around mid-April this year. This project actually has a targeted completion date of 30 working days, but please keep in mind that once again is weather dependent as well. So once again, Mr. Mayor, the big takeaway here is what we're hoping to do, or actually get council approval, is to actually be able to advertise for this project and have a public hearing on this project on March 15th of this year. And that concludes the staff presentation. I'd be more than happy to answer any questions the mayor and council may have on this item.
All right, thank you, Mike. Can I get a motion for approval?
So moved.
Support.
DeYoung, Branderhorst, any discussion?
Do we own to the middle of the road, or do we own all the road?
Denny,
Both sides, starting at the corner.
Mandy, if we can go back to slide number 14,
Unless
please.
there's a little piece right at the corner that's not. But you have the Gary Vermeer house, and then the rest of that's all their daycare, so on and so
Okay.
forth. Those annexed in sometime. I believe we own half the corner.
Okay.
Okay, anything else? Okay, all in favor, please say yes. Opposed, no. Mandy, please call the roll.
DeYoung.
Yes.
Reindeerhorst.
Yes.
Stanstrand.
Yes.
Carlstone.
Yes.
Hopkins.
Yes.
Spore.
Yes.
Motion passed. Resolution number 6398, entitled Resolution Approving Engagement Letters with D.A. Davidson for Underwriting or Placement Agent Services. Mike?
Yes, Mr. Mayor. For those following at home, I'm on slide number 16 this evening. What we're considering this evening is engagement letters with D.A. Davidson. And for those of the council is familiar with Mr. Michael Maloney, he served as the city's financial advisor. He works for D.A. Davidson. What the financial engagement services letters would be doing is actually geared towards two projects that we have. If council recalls, as far as our incentive package for the Prairie Ridge commercial development, we had the time, and we'll be talking during this upcoming budget cycle, but last year as well, we talked about the need to potentially issue bond issues to fund those incentive packages for the Prairie Ridge development. D.A. Davidson would serve as facilitate that bond issue. And probably the second and more important issue that we have ongoing right now, if council recalls, we did talk about our long-term facilities plan, and hopefully having some direction established by March 31st of this year. Now, in order to do that, there'll be a lot of financial calculations on this one as we consider a potential indoor recreation center for the community, as well as potential enhancements to the Pella Community Center. As a part of that, it's beneficial, I believe, to have a third party perform those calculations, just so we have someone else looking at the numbers and verifying the information with staff on it. Mr. Michael Maloney is an expert in the field on that as well. So that's part of the services covered with this. Now, it is important to note, as far as the payments on this, it's entirely dependent if the city issues bond issues for either one of these projects or not. That's when D.A. Davidson would be compensated. Their fee would be included with the underwriter's fee, and it's just under 0.875% as well, which we believe is reasonable for the services that they will be rendering for the City of Pella. So with that, Mr. Mayor, we are recommending approval of both of these agreements this evening, and be more than happy to answer any questions the Mayor and Council may have on this item.
All right, thank you, Mike. Can we get a motion for approval?
So moved.
Young, Hopkins, any discussion? Okay, all in favor, please say yes. Opposed, no. Mandy, please call the roll.
DeYoung.
Yes.
Hopkins.
Yes.
Spore.
Yes.
Vanderhorst.
Yes.
DeAnstruck.
Yes.
Carlstone.
Yes.
Motion passed. Resolution number 6399, entitled Resolution Approving Change Order Number 1, Change Order Number 2, Final Quantity Adjustment and Accepting the Public Improvements for the East Interchange Infrastructure Improvements Lift Station. Mike?
Yes, Mr. Mayor. Once again, I'd like to direct the Mayor and Council's attention to the big board for a brief presentation on this item. As Mayor of the Ward stated, we're considering a couple change orders this evening for the lift station improvements that we have. Now, this was associated with the Laley development, and we do have showing of the force man as well as the lift station, but this is right here is exit 44 off Highway 163, and the area that we're talking about is Laley's new corporate headquarters is located just southwest of the interchange as well. Now, as far as the change orders overall, they're just shy as a $4,000 reduction in the overall contract price for the project. We do have a summary of both change orders up here as well. So with that, if council were to approve this, we started off with an original contract of $696,709. The change orders that we are considering this evening would actually be a deduction, which we believe is the final contract amount of $692,932.92. And Mandy, I believe that's the only slide that we have this evening. Oh, no, stand corrected. Okay, when we talk about the lift station, you do see a picture up on the big board of what the lift station is, the Laley lift station that we have as well. Beanster and Kim was the project engineer on the project, and they believe the project was completed with accordance with plans and specifications. And they are recommending approval this evening. Staff is in agreement with the resolution as well. And so with that, Mr. Mayor, that concludes our presentation this evening. More than happy to answer any questions the Mayor and Council may have on this item.
All right, thank you, Mike. Can I get a motion for approval?
So moved.
Support.
DeYoung, Vanderhorst. Any discussion? Okay, all in favor, please say yes. Opposed, no. Mandy, please call the roll.
DeYoung.
Yes.
Vanderhorst.
Yes.
DeAnstruck.
Yes.
Carlstone.
Yes.
Hopkins.
Yes.
Spore.
Yes.
Motion passed. I get a motion for approval of abstract bills number 2097.
Move to approve and issue warrants.
Support.
Vanderhorst, DeYoung, any questions or discussion? All right, all in favor, please say yes. Opposed, no. Mandy, please call the roll.
Vanderhorst.
Yes.
DeYoung.
Yes.
DeAnstruck.
Yes.
Carlstone.
Yes.
Hopkins.
Yes.
Spore.
Yeah.
Motion passed. All right, any council member have any other business we need to discuss tonight? Any public comment on something other than the library at this point? Okay, then we will go into our discussion regarding the Pella Community Ambulance, and then we'll go back for a public input time for the library. Okay?
All right, Mr. Mayor, as Mayor DeWard stated, what we're here to talk tonight about is the Pella Community Ambulance. And before stating about the ambulance, I think it goes without saying that they've provided excellent service to this community and the general area around the City of Pella for over 40 years. And it's been an essential service for the city, and a lot of folks have come to depend on the ambulance. And from my perspective, they've done an exceptional job. What we're talking about this evening and updating the council on this, and Councilmember Banster and I have been working with the ambulance on this as strategies and just a general discussion on a go-forward basis and making sure that we continue to be able to provide the service in the future. But when we talk about the ambulance, what you see up here on the map is really a map of the service territory. And generally right in this area is the City of Pella city limits. And if you were to follow the black lines here, that is the service area that the Pella Community Ambulance currently serves out here. So if you were to look at this, it goes well into Mahaska County. It actually includes the town of Layton down here, goes well into southern Marion County, and actually goes all the way up to State Highway 14 on the western boundaries. And as you can see, there's a significant portion all the way up to the Marion County, Jasper County line to the north as well. So the geographical service boundary extends quite a ways above and beyond the City of Pella on this as well. So Mandy, let's go ahead, please. Now, when we talk about strategies on a go-forward basis, what I would say is in the ambulance, and really when you look in the public safety world on things, we're dealing with a new environment than we've had in the past several years. When you look at the ambulance, and if you were to show this back even further, the numbers would be even more dramatic, but we just picked 2013 because it's relatively recent on here. But it also shows what's been happening to the call volumes on it. In 2013, the ambulance was right around 1,382 service calls. This past year, they were just shy of 1,900. And if you were to look at that, that's been a 37% increase in call volume. Now, when we look at those call volumes, let's go ahead, please, Mandy, to our next graph that we have up here. When we look at it, it's basically broken down to, if you remember the map, we talked about the ambulance serves the City of Pella. They also service what I would generally call the townships. I know that there's the town of Layton as well, and a few other areas, but for purposes of discussion tonight, we're calling everybody else the townships, and they also serve the Pella Regional Hospital as well. We've subtracted out the hospital calls for purposes of discussion tonight. When you talk about, really when you look at the service calls and you talk about financial hardships, it isn't necessarily attributed to transport calls associated with Pella Regional on that. That's a relatively sure source of revenue for the ambulance. It's really on these 911 calls and getting people to the hospital is really where the discussion and the risk uncertainty depends on. For purposes of discussion, if we were to look at the service calls for it, we believe the City of Pella's percentage of non-hospital transport calls, 69%. Everybody else is at 31%. So as you keep this discussion in mind tonight, please keep that in mind as well as far as the general breakdown on the service calls. Mandy, let's go ahead, please. But one of the things that's happened over the years to the Pella ambulance is a higher percentage of its patients are both Medicaid and Medicare patients. Now, generally, when you compare this, and Greg's here this evening, or Chief's here this evening, and he'd be happy to explain this in much more thorough detail on this, but generally, those reimbursement rates are significantly lower than a privately insured individual. And so, as our call volumes are gone up, a higher percentage of overall calls are both Medicaid and Medicare patients as well, which generates a lower reimbursement rate. That by itself creates a hardship for the agency as well. Now, one of the things that we've had, and we've been very, very fortunate through the years, in fact, I would say most people think that the ambulance is operated by the City of Pella. I would say it's been an excellent service through the years, but one of the things when you look at it is there are grant programs through the state of Iowa, reimbursement programs that would help reimburse agencies for these lower payments from Medicaid and Medicare patients. But because the ambulance is a nonprofit agency and not a government agency, they're not eligible for those grant reimbursements through the state of Iowa as well. So that's one of the dilemmas that we've been struggling with, is our little working group on that, as well as trying to chart a path forward on this. So let's go ahead, please, Mandy. Now, one of the things I would say that's happened, and it isn't just in the ambulance, but it's something that we've noted in the community and around, and this is just not a City of Pella issue. I would say it's really nationwide. People are busy nowadays on it, and they've always been busy. But one of the things that's happened to the ambulance is there's been a decreasing volunteer or part-time labor pool. And what that's done is, if your call volume is going up and you have to staff those and respond to those calls, what that's done is forced the agency to hire more full-time personnel. So from an expenditure standpoint, expenditures have gone up because the volunteer pool hasn't been what it has been in the past as well. So if you wanted to take away the reasons why we're talking here tonight, we have an increase in call volume since 2013. Calls have went up 37%. We have a larger percentage of our overall calls of Medicaid and Medicare patients. Those patients generate a lower reimbursement rate the agency is not eligible for state assistance because it's a nonprofit agency to help offset that. And then we also have a decreasing volunteer part-time labor pool. And so if you were to wrap those general issues all around, that's the reason why we're talking about the future of the Pella ambulance as well. So Mandy, let's go ahead. Now, as far as an operating number here, and again, we've tried to monitor this, and these are just general items. I would tell you, as far as the operating deficit, it appears to me that there's going to be somewhere between $200,000 to $300,000. Now, I've listed up 300,000 just to be conservative for discussion purposes this evening, but generally that's what I think you're looking at. Now, as far as ambulance goes, when we look at, you have not only the operating issues, but you also have the capital improvements that are necessary as well. Capital improvements for the ambulance as it relates to this, the here and the now, is replacement of ambulances. And so when we look out over our 5 years and we look at the fleet that the ambulance has, they have a couple ambulances that need or are in need of replacement. So when you look at replacing an ambulance, it's about a $200,000 expenditure on it as well. Now, when we've looked at it and we've ran comparisons as far as operating agency, if they were to continue on as a nonprofit agency or if they were to continue on as a City of Pella department, we think it's about a wash. And the reason we do is on this, if you were to look at this, is we would be eligible for grants to help offset the Medicaid and Medicare patients on that. So there'd be additional revenues. But when you look at the benefits that Pella Ambulance currently offers compared to the cities, some of them are mandated by state codes such as HIPERS and the city's health insurance programs that we do offer our full-time employees on it. We believe that those would be additional costs on the City of Pella side. So by the time you add things up and you look at it big picture, we think it's about a push either way on it. One of the things that we've talked about with our group is when you look at really on a go-forward basis and being able to continue on a go-forward basis, it appears it would be beneficial if the Pella ambulance was operated by the City of Pella. And the reason for that is if we're looking at one of the key items that we did not talk about, but paramedics are in demand in the state of Iowa and actually nationwide. Trying to retain quality employees like we currently have for the Pella ambulance and also attract new employees can be difficult. We think that would be easier if it was at the City of Pella and we had, when you look at the city's benefit package as well. So that's another item to consider. So financially, we think it's somewhat of a push if they continued on as a nonprofit versus operated by the City of Pella. And it appears, if you were to look at just basically being able to retain and attract employees in the future, it appears to be beneficial if it was operated by the City of Pella. And before I go on and allow the ambulance to, and Chief to give just an update and cover anything I'm sure I missed, Mr. Mayor, I'll stop right here, and I'd like to ask Councilmember Banstra if I've missed anything or if he'd like to add anything on this as well.
No, I guess just a couple things I'd like to add, and then Mike, I'll ask you to comment on it. Ambulance service is not required by the Code of Iowa for a city to operate. Is that correct?
Yeah, it's not currently classified as an essential service. That is correct.
So we have no legal obligation as compared to police force where we have to offer a fire service and police service. So I think that's one important thing to remember, that we're doing this because we're moving forward. We think it's extremely important to the community. And then the second thing that we really looked at it as a group, as Mike suggested, the Pella ambulance has done an excellent job over the years. We looked really hard if the city could contract with the ambulance service and we would receive that money from the state that we could forward to them. And since that's creative, of course, the state said no. Because one of the things that I always worried about when you have something successful, then you get a bunch of us rum-dums helping operate it. You know, that's always a tough thing. But we looked into that, and what were some of the numbers that Knoxville received from that GEMT?
I think they've gotten over $300,000 total in the last couple of years.
Yeah,
So, now, we wouldn't get that much, but.
No, but we get nothing right now. So that's, I think, an important way. We tried to find an end run so that we could receive the funds and still pass them on to the ambulance service, but that just hit a brick wall wherever we look. So I guess those are a couple of things I'd like to mention to the group.
Thank you for trying.
So,
are we splitting hairs? Present organization is nonprofit, but the city is not.
We're a governmental entity, yes.
So that's
Yeah,
not a
the difference.
301C or whatever.
Yeah. We're eligible for state assistance and for ambulance services. They're currently not.
I always thought we were kind of nonprofit.
Are there any hospital systems still operating ambulances in Iowa?
In Mahaska is.
They're a government agency down there, so that probably gives them a heads up, but I don't know if that was looked into at all.
Do you guys want me up there?
Well,
Yeah.
that's something we're gonna talk about.
Or you, wherever, you're close enough.
Okay,
If you wanna add.
I believe Mahaska is a county-based ambulance, so a county-based hospital, so they get the government entity, they can receive the GMTs as far as I'm aware of.
I was curious about that service area line.
Mhm.
Is that hypothetical, or like Harvey wasn't in there, so if
Nope.
somebody from Harvey calls, they can't call you, or?
Nope, they actually, Harvey's got an agreement with Knoxville.
Okay.
Knoxville actually, and this was done years and years ago, Knoxville actually covers Harvey.
So is there any, so the outlying areas, the townships, as we said, is there funds coming from them, or potential funds to help for if it's the City of Pella ambulance,
Mhm.
we're covering more than the City of Pella, so the City of Pella is bearing the burden of the cost. Is there any, other than the grant you're talking about is a state grant, right?
It's,
The
yes, the GMT, Ground Emergency
Yeah.
Medical Transport Grant.
Is there any money from those townships or any source of revenue to
Not-
subsidize in this
Not
country?
currently,
Okay.
not currently. The state passed the essential service bill last year, which will allow taxation for EMS service. Nobody's currently doing that yet, because there's still a lot of gray areas with it, but it is something that I believe will happen in the future.
So the county doesn't have any obligation to assist?
Currently.
Not current. There's discussions to,
It's coming down the pipeline.
okay.
So we've had the township trustees involved in our discussions too, and it's a tough deal for them as well too, because obviously they want service to the folks that live in the rural areas. The question we wrestle is that then how much do we expect the Pella taxpayers to fund those out there? And I've always said this is gonna be a transition year. We have to show some grace to our neighbors as we figure this out, but at some point, we'll have to sit down and say, hey, what's fair is fair on who we provide service to. But it's a tough call.
Could this eventually follow
As a
the
city-
model of fire department, where there's townships that we help supply equipment and so forth to the fire department?
Yeah, I'd like to state, and according to Councilmember DeYoung, we've had a very successful partnership with Lake Prairie for a lot of years. We've always been able to work things out, and we've approached it, and as Councilmember Bannister stated, we've had Lake Prairie Township trustees attend our meetings as well. And I think that's probably the key thing that'll have to be discussed with the township, is the rural contribution. But to answer your question, Councilmember DeYoung, with the full-time staff, it's probably a little bit different from the get-go on it as far as a partnership. And the agency at that point probably needs to take the lead on what we have. And so it's a little different than the fire department, but I think it goes without saying, we've had a successful partnership with Lake Prairie for fire services for years on that. And that's been successful not only for our community, but for areas outside of Pella as well. And so this would probably be more structured if the city proceeds as a city department. We'd be the lead agency, and we'd be contracting out for these folks in the outlying areas. In other words, we would have to have agreements with anyone that we serviced out there through the ambulance.
So right now, how many staff short, your staff shortage right now?
We are not at a staff shortage right now. We're fully staffed, and we're blessed. We're one of the few services around here right now that are not in a shortage. I accredit that to our EMT class that we've done every year, and we've gotten a great recruitment from that. So we are truly blessed where we don't have a shortage.
So you have more?
No, sir.
So what do you want from us tonight, just to?
I think the big thing we want from tonight is this is an informational session. What we're planning on doing is we'll be budgeting contingency funds if the ambulance was a part of the City of Pella during our budget discussions next week. We wanted to make sure before we got into those discussions that we at least broach the subject, or not broach, I think most of the council is aware that we're working on this, but we wanted to make sure that everyone had the same basic knowledge as you consider the budget next year. And just for discussion purposes, what we've talked about tentatively is July of this year as far as potential transitions on it as well. And I think the big takeaway tonight is we want to make sure that as we consider our options, that as council had anything else we needed to research or be doing, we'd like to know about it. And we know tonight's kind of short notice. If you think about things, want to talk about it next week during budget meetings, that's fair too, so.
I think it would be good too if we could hear what some of the actions of the ambulance board have been as they kind of prepared this for now, for this event. In terms of a transfer, if we could get something figured out.
As far as
Equipment and those kind of things.
Yep, we actually, the board voted last month to actually turn assets over to the city. We are at a point where we're a year, 2 years out from completely running out. That's where we're at. So we're in dire need. That's why we come to you guys as we're there. So there's obviously the attractiveness is the funding that's coming down from the state is through a government entity, and I think it's going to, the reason they do that is they want to regulate, and that's the best way you can regulate is through funding. I've had 2 letters I put to the Attorney General to try and get us to qualify for that, even partnered with other nonprofits, and it still didn't work. So we've tried other avenues ourselves to try to make that happen, and it didn't.
So all the funding.
And the other thing is if, Medicare reimbursement is a problem, the demographics are against you.
They are. In fact,
Old
I've
dogs
got,
like me are just a leading edge.
yeah. Our Medicare, just to show you where we're at, in 2018, Medicare and Medicaid was 52% of our calls. In 2018 and 19, it was 60%. In 2019 and 2020, it was 64%. In 2020-21, it was 68%, and we are currently on pace at 70% of our calls are Medicare and Medicaid now. So we are busier, and we're bringing in less.
Not a good combination.
It's not.
No banker.
And on top of that, our non-transport calls are up also, which we get paid $0 for that. That's where we go and we just check on people. We go to car accident scenes and check them out. We get $0 for any of that, and those numbers are way up too. I think we're at 40% of our calls are non-transports right now.
Did you all broach the subject of Pella Regional at all?
I talked with Bob Crozy a couple of years ago when we did a secure car. At that point, he had said he wanted nothing to do with an ambulance service. So,
As I
And
figured,
then also,
but the service area, obviously, I assume you're returning a vast majority to Pella Regional.
yes, yep.
I think they should be broached as having a direct interest in that territory. It seems to be another funding source. It happens to be the one that pays my salary, but it seems to be mutually beneficial. I don't know if we're beyond that for you guys that worked on the project, but is Knoxville City of?
Yes.
Okay.
Yep. The big thing with the hospital is, and not to interrupt you, is that when we go to the hospital, we do all the transports for them.
Yeah.
And so that's guaranteed, when a doctor signs off on it,
Yep.
It's guaranteed money. The insurance doesn't balk at it, Medicare and Medicaid doesn't balk at it, it's
Yep.
all paid, so.
Yeah, I think that's worth somehow, I don't know if there's a next step, but they should be asked to come to the table. Hope I don't get fired over this. They obviously have an interest in that. I think the other thing is out of my mind, so never mind.
Councilmember Carlstone and Chief, correct me if I'm wrong, but Dr. Thorsten also carries a medical license for the Pella.
He's our medical director.
We've been working with Dr. Thorsten, and I assume that he was representing the
He was-
hospital.
He was.
Yes, on it. So he's been a part of our group that we've been working on for some time as well. So, but we have not asked specifically for financial contributions from Pella Regional.
That was the other point. The other point is, we are a critical access hospital, which may end up providing some higher bureaucratic funds, federal maybe, or something like that. I don't know. I'm sure there's dollars available. And to get to the point that was brought up about Medicare being predominant federal payer source, and a lot of that, I don't know what the difference in black and the purple lines are. Being outside the city of Pella, I'd see that being something to push a little bit more on.
Okay. Anything else? I assume the financial impact and all that will be part of the budget process.
Yes,
More
sir.
details there.
Yes, sir.
Okay. All right. Thanks a lot for being here. Thanks for your input. And we will for sure have more discussion about it.
Thank you.
Okay. All right, so now we're going to move on to the Library Policy Committee. Just a reminder of what's happening. There was a book that was challenged in the Pella Library. There was a process in place for that challenge to be heard, and the library board made a decision under the policy. And then as a city council, we asked the library policy committee to review policies related to books and access and all those types of things. And I asked Councilwoman Brandon Horst and Swore to be part of that discussion, so they met with the policy committee, I believe, of the board, the library board of trustees. So tonight we're here to hear the result of that discussion. Before we talk up here, I want to give everybody an opportunity out there to express anything they want to express concerning this item. So, as usual, if you want to do that, please come forward, state your name and address, make your comments, and with as many people here, please, please, please try to stay to 3 minutes. I don't want to have to cut people off, so be disciplined.
Oh, you love cutting. Turn it toward you. Patty, turn it toward you. Okay. Hi, Marty. I'm Patty Van Zandt. I live at 1117 Big Rock Park Road, Pella. I'd like to open with a verse from Matthew 7. Do not judge, or you too will be judged. For the same way you judge others, you will be judged. And with the measure you use, it will be measured to you. Removing books from the public libraries and schools because people don't like them or are offended is censorship. This violates the First and 14th Amendments of the American Constitution, as well as the Iowa Constitution and laws. The current outrage is directed at the LGBTQ community. Removing or hiding books under a desk will not force these individuals back into dark closets, nor remove these individuals from our families and communities. I know the majority who will be speaking in favor of banning these books from public libraries mean well and have a genuine concern for the innocent souls of children, but they don't realize that they are stimulating young people's curiosity about these books and pointing in the direction of actually reading them. I know that many forms of creative expression, especially graphic novels, the graphic novel genre can be offensive, along with being quite confusing and disturbing. This is precisely why normally I avoid reading graphic novels. These books aren't aimed at children. I am sure that the majority here can agree that it is the duty and responsibility of parents to monitor what their children are reading and do not want to delegate this responsibility to governments. And I lost my place. Okay. Far more explicit and disturbing things are being viewed nearly hourly by children on their phones and computers. Children are far at greater risk of having their innocence being corrupted and sexual abuse at the hands of priests, ministers, youth leaders, and while participating in group activities such as sports and scouts, than from reading books from a library or seeing a transgender young person at a swimming pool. I worked for nearly 10 years as a therapist with sexual offenders and their victims, testified in court as an expert witness, did risk assessments and amicability to treatment in conjunction with providing individual, group, family treatment to sexual offenders in both inpatient and outpatient settings. This has made me painfully aware of the corrupting dangers our children face daily. However, in my personal experience with offenders, their victims, families, staff, and colleagues, I have never encountered a child who was corrupted or endangered by the LGBTQ individuals or by any books they may have read in any library, public library. I can assure my friends and neighbors here this evening that removing or hiding books from libraries will never remove nor hide the LGBTQ individuals in our communities, families, or amongst our friends. I leave you with the words of our Savior. As we proceed this evening, please remember, hearing that Jesus had silenced the Sadducees, the Pharisees got together. One of them, an expert in law, tested him with this question: Teacher, which is the greatest commandment in the law? Jesus replied, love the Lord your God with your heart, and all your soul, and with all your mind. This is the first and greatest commandment. And the second is, love your neighbor as yourself. All the law and the prophets hang on these two commandments. And John, this is love, not that we love God, but that he loves us and sent his Son as an atoning sacrifice for our sins. Dear friends, since God so loved us, we also ought to love one another. We love because he first loved us. For whoever does not love their brother and sister whom they have seen cannot love God with whom they have not seen. I would like to have you remember to extend as much grace to each other this evening as you can, because we're all neighbors and we all care about what happens to our children. Thank you.
Hello, my name is Anita Fisher. I hope you can hear me okay because I have a cold, but I live at 1546 Pleasant Drive here in town. First I want to say, I want to make a correction. Someone just spoke for a huge part of the community and said that we are against the LGBTQ plus community. That is far from the truth, okay? We love them like Christ loves them all. We know we are commanded to love. We do not love them any less than heterosexual people, than people that want to call themselves queers, whatever they want to call themselves. It does not matter. We love them, okay? I want to make that clear. Now, with what I want to say, I have attended several board meetings since this whole issue came up about the book Gender Queer. I have heard parents speak about how the library is no longer a place where they feel they can let their children go free to explore. I've also heard responses from library board members such as, we are the library and not a babysitter for your children. While I agree that this is not the purpose of the library, I don't believe the board is understanding our concerns. My daughter is 12 years old. She often visits our library and enjoys looking at books and flipping through them. She enjoys exploring reading materials in all areas of the library. As we all know, graphic books such as Genderqueer, along with other comic-looking illustrations, attack the eyes of minors. I have since asked her not to go into the adult section because of certain books that the library has decided to put there. Her response was this, quote, "Well, that's dumb. Why don't they just put them behind the counter?" Unquote. Since the beginning of this year's legislation session in January, several of us have attended the State House and have had the opportunity to speak with legislators on both sides of the aisle about the pictures in Genderqueer. They all agreed that the pictures are obscene and should not be available to minors. Several of them acknowledged the negative effects these pictures could have on our children. I've heard from a few people that these pictures are pornographic. Well, let's hear from some experts. What does a family doctor think? After showing the pictures to a local family doctor, they deemed them to be pornographic and directed me to visit the American Academy of Pediatrics to read about the harmful effects pornography has on a child's brain. How about a professor? Dr. Adriana Galvan is an award-winning professor of psychology at UCLA, whose expertise is in adolescent brain development. In the past decade, she had received awards from the Cognitive Neuroscience Society Young Investigation Award, the Department of Psychology Distinguished Teaching Award, and Fellow of the Association for Psychological Science Award, and that's just to name a few. When speaking about sexual addiction and porn, Dr. Galvan stated that the prefrontal cortex of the brain changes every day until a person is in their mid-20s. Everything that is viewed by a minor is taken into consideration and becomes a part of their makeup. Teens and adults were part of a lab, now this is interesting. Teens and adults were part of a lab study in which they were fed sugar through a straw during an MRI. The teen brain, Galvan said, was much more excitable to sugar. A second test group of teens and adults was brought in, and the group was shown images of money. Once again, the teens were more excitable. That tells us something about the teenage brain, Galvan said. The teen brain is very responsive to environment. The behavior path of addiction can begin with this. A child or a teen accidentally finds sexual content, porn, and then is followed by them beginning to seek it out on purpose. They think about how or when they are going to get access to the obscene material throughout the day. They can create a ritual or routine around it, using it, and are ignorant to the consequences or negative impacts on viewing porn. The desire can eventually lead to a need. At an event where Dr. Galvan was speaking, she was asked one question: what defines porn? Dr. Galvan responded, "I would be willing to say, if you are offended by it, it is probably under the umbrella of porn." She goes on to say, teenage brains are different from adults and are still forming. Teen brains are tasked with neuronal wiring so they can reproduce in the future. Resting dopamine levels are lower than adults, and as teenagers respond to a stimulus, the amount of dopamine released is considerably greater. Because of this, their brains are more at risk for pornography addiction. The biggest sexual organ you have is actually your brain. Sexual stimulation releases the highest natural quantities of dopamine. When dopamine is elevated long term, it leads to brain changes that are associated with addiction, such as hyperreactivity cues. In turn, this leads to porn addiction. Now, parents were cautioned to be aware of the warning signs of such addiction, which include isolation, lying, being mentally foggy and distracted, grades dropping in school, emotional empathy, and very low energy and memory loss. It was also stated that we must be aware of books that show sexual images or talk about sexual fantasies, which can lead to porn and or arousal addiction, are a detriment to our children's psychological well-being. What I find incredibly interesting is that while many groups and individuals believe material such as what is in these books are acceptable for the eyes of children, An Iowa news organization, Iowa Standard, wrote an article about genderqueer and shared some of its content. Google requested that the material be removed. Why? Because they deemed it to be adult material, sexual content.
Okay, you have to wrap it up. I'm trying to be patient, but our first two speakers are going 7, 8 minutes.
Okay, so
You
can I read the last paragraph?
Please, I'll make it the last.
So also Facebook said, when they posted some pictures, your post goes against community standards, and that they needed to remove the post because the pictures that were in genderqueer. Would any of you be okay with your child or grandchildren smoking, drinking, or experimenting with drugs? I would hope to hear a resounding no. Let me be clear. We are not fighting against any particular group, but we are fighting for the mental well-being of our children. Please help protect their innocence, and thank you for your time.
My name is Ann Visser. I live at 1006 Broadway. Mine will be short. I have two things. Number one, I have nothing but the utmost respect and admiration for the people who are running our library and on our library board. They have upheld all of the standards that they have in place, and they've done a wonderful job in everything that they've been asked to do. Number two, I would say to you, anytime you ban a book, you're opening a door that I'm not sure you want to open. It's a slippery slope, and I encourage you to consider whether or not you want to take that step. Thank you.
Thank you for being brief, Ann.
Intentionally so.
My name is Jan Godike. I live at 2392 Keokuk Drive. I agree, Ann, this is a slippery slope. But I stand here tonight with a broken heart that this book even needs to be addressed. This community that I was born and raised in was built on hard work and Christian values. People move to Pella because of its quaintness and good values. And unfortunately, others are trying really hard to change this. This book is pure pornography. It is causing much heartbreak and is nothing but the work of Satan. If you let this one go, it's only going to snowball into bigger and more dangerous problems in the future. As you can tell, I'm not a person who likes to be speaking in front of a crowd. But the past several weeks, I have felt the Lord nudging me to stand up for His values and for the children of our community. What happens when somebody that's been in the library looking and reading this book sees the pictures of masturbation and more and leaves the library and sees a young child, your grandchild, your child, my grandchild, and decides to lure them into their car? And well, you know what I'm getting at. What are you going to do then? This needs to stop now. Please listen to the citizens that trusted in voting you to represent them on this council to do what is right. Stand up for your Lord because you know what direction He is leading you. Thank you.
I didn't have anything planned either, and I'm not a public speaker either, so my name is Robin Stearns, 222 East Jefferson. I want to reiterate, I don't know why I'm going to call the other side, and I'm sorry, but we're definitely on sides here, is so LGBTQ. We hate the LGBTQ. We don't want them here. We don't love them. They don't belong here. That's never what this has been about. And we have made that very, very clear. Mm-hmm. You don't hear that part. We love you all. We don't want you to leave. You have your place here. We love you. Whether we agree or we don't agree, everyone belongs here. Our issue is that there are, by definition, pornographic illustrations in this book. And it is within our children's reach. I've also lived here for most of my life, over 30 years. This wouldn't have been an issue 10 years ago because it never would have been allowed. I don't know. I don't understand why it's allowed. If it were simply a trans story, someone honestly saying, these were my struggles, fine. Fine. But it's not. This book goes into sexual pleasure of self and of others, ways to find that sexual pleasure by the use of sex toys, masturbation, ways to sexually please yourself and others, blowjobs with pictures of blowjobs, pictures of a blowjob to a strap-on. Are you comfortable with those words? Because I'm not. But our kids can read them, and our kids can see them. Our kids don't need a book to refer to, and especially not one like this. They need counseling. They need relationships with their parents. Maybe they need family counseling. If kids don't feel comfortable to speak with their parents about that, this is a family issue. This is not a go to the library and find a book that teaches me these things. These things are not about discovering who you are and what gender you're supposed to be. It's not about the trans. I know there's gender confused people, and I feel for them. I truly do, because I can't understand it. I can't begin to understand it. I admire their strength, and it's got to be hard. But things in this book, that's not the way to teach them what they're supposed to be. Thank you.
My name is Terry Ryerson, and I live at 220 Carson Street. I attended the December 14th library board meeting, and during the public comment period, I was one of the people who spoke in favor of keeping genderqueer on the library shelves. Wasn't planning on saying anything that night, but I realized that night how important it is for the council and the library board to hear that more than one opinion exists in this town. That's why I'm standing here again tonight. I have heard you refer to genderqueer as pornographic or obscene. Several times I have even heard to reference to Iowa Code 728, which defines obscene material. There's a sentence, though, in that code that keeps getting left off. And it says, and the material taken as a whole lacks serious literary, scientific, political, or artistic value. Genderqueer is an award-winning book. It has been awarded the American Library Association Stonewall Book Award, as well as an Alex Award. It has proven its artistic value. I've also heard opinions that children need to be protected from this book. The American Library Association says this: librarians and governing bodies should maintain that only parents and guardians have the right and responsibility to determine their children's, and only their children's, access to library resources. Parents who do not want their children to have access to specific library services, materials, or facilities should advise their children. I have heard requests even so far as to request defunding the library if this book is to remain on the shelves, as well as admonishment of our library board and of the staff at the library. I am here not only to voice my support for genderqueer, but also to show my support for the way the library board and the library director have conducted themselves and stuck to their written policies during this challenge. Of course, we should continue to fund our library. It's a cornerstone of our community. And then finally, I want to end with something more personal. When I first moved to Pella over a decade ago, I volunteered with a local mentorship organization. The first day I met my mentee, who was then a middle school preteen, she introduced herself to me by telling me her name and that she's bisexual. A preteen working through her sexual identity, and someone who almost exclusively read graphic novels. Although this book is not specifically applicable to her, she is exactly the type of person for which this book was written. And as a child that had already struggled to make of parents who already struggled to make ends meet, She's exactly the type of person for whom this book needs to remain on our public library shelves. We're going to continue to see more books added to our library that are controversial like this one. We're going to see books depict homosexuality and the LGBTQ. Like you said, those folks are part of our community. When the library is adding to our collection, the library board and the director are following policies that are already spelled out and have been for a long time. For the city council to override the library board on their decision and our policy for the sake of one controversial yet award-winning book sets a scary precedent for the future.
My name is Anthony Hodges. I live at 1120 Hazel Street. I've not lived at this address too long. My accent will betray me, I'm sure. I chose Pella for my wife and sons because of its historically Dutch Reformed Christian roots and culture. It's hard work and decency. I come from a large city, grew up there, lived there my whole life, and it's all but abandoned its roots and culture in favor of Marxist notions of equity and libertinism. And I'm here to plead with you as my neighbors and my local leaders to please not take Pella down the same path. This book, which we are discussing, by the way, has been published, right? So cries of censorship are kind of misnomers. Anyone here tonight can take out your phone and order this book from Amazon.com, I checked, for $16.99 of your own money. Please do not make your neighbors complicit in this cultural detriment by using our tax dollars to put this book in our public library. If you want a copy available in this town, please purchase it for yourself with your own money and keep it in your own home, though in all honesty, I sincerely hope you don't. I'm happy that there have been numerous mothers speaking at these meetings, speaking out to protect their children, the children of this town. But I also must confess, I'm just as concerned about certain adults who would want to view some of this material. Yes, this is a memoir, as the title shows, and that is the context in which we find these objectionable images. And context is king. But context alone is not the only determining factor for what is and is not pornographic and what is and is not pedophilic. I keep hearing pornography a lot and pornographic. Let's keep in mind these images are of minors. Wherever you land on the political scale, these are images of minors. Some things simply have no merit, regardless of artistic or cultural context. And forgive my candor, but cartoon images of minors explicitly performing sexual acts cannot be redeemed by context. They simply have no merit. There are families in this town, mothers who my wife and I know personally, trying to educate their children in the beautiful tradition of Western civilization, requesting explicitly Christian materials from our Pella library and have been denied these materials. This is happening here. Yet here we are fighting for genderqueer to be added. I realize Pella is not a monolith. We all know this. Public services like libraries and city council, I'm sure they'll agree, cannot comprehensively serve the entire community with equitable perfection, by which I mean they can't give me everything I want and also simultaneously give you everything you want. We all understand this. So now we have to ask ourselves, how will we, as this community, define what is good for our community? Will we bend entirely to the will of a vocal, progressive minority, or will our tax-funded institutions reflect the culture of our historically Christian citizens in history? Thank you.
I'm Pam Moldy, 1624 Briar Lane, Pella. so I wanted to start out today first. I wanted to talk about something that was brought up about Jesus judging. There's actually 3 times in the Bible that it talks about judging. 2 of them are actually allowed, and one of them isn't. The type of judging that isn't allowed is hypocritical judging. And that is not what we're doing here today. So that was actually taken out of context. Like what has been said, this isn't about LGBTQ. It's not. It's about pictures that are pornographic. It doesn't matter if they are heterosexual. It doesn't matter if they're homosexual. The pictures are graphic, and they're sexual in nature. So I want to start out here sharing with you a quote. And this is from Benjamin Rush. He was a founding father, signer of the Declaration of Independence. And one thing he said is that the only foundation for a republic is to be laid in religion. He was talking about the Christian religion. Without this, there can be no virtue. And without virtue, there can be no liberty. And liberty is the object and life of all Republican governments. Now, if you look up the word virtue, it means moral goodness. Moral goodness. So if we look at these pictures that are in this book, how can we say that these are morally good to put in front of minor kids? I would say we could not say that. Another quote I wanted to share with you is from Edmund Burke, and I'm sure you've heard it before, that it says the only thing that it takes for evil to triumph is for good men to do nothing. If you look at Jesus, go to what he did. He walked in truth and he walked in love, okay? And sometimes he had to do what was right. One thing he did when he saw things that were wrong is he went into the temple, he turned over money tables, and he drove people out because he stood for what was truth, because he didn't want evil to triumph. So I'm asking you on the council today, I know several of you are Christian. I'm asking you to stand for truth. Will you stand for truth? Will you stand for what is morally right? And I hope that you will. And I want to leave you with this. This is a little snippet that I pulled out about Pella. It says Pella, and my note is that Pella has been a city set apart in this state. In fact, its founding reflects this. The first settlers called their new home Pella because it was a name taken out of the Bible. In the Bible, it's a city of refuge. And upon the seal of their new town in Pella, these early settlers inscribed the words, and I have some words in Dutch, which I'm not going to try to read, but they mean in God, our hope and refuge. You guys have a great opportunity on the City Council to uphold our city as such. And I ask that you please protect our youth and do that. Thank you.
My name is Mary Ellen Butler. I live at 406 Franklin. Mr. Mayor and City Council. My last 10 years of gainful employment were in a preschool classroom. It was a wonderful job. I would have done it for free, but the school insisted on issuing me a paycheck. Every morning I felt as though I were walking into a garden of beautiful faces. You know, children idolize their teachers. And it was the closest I'll ever come to being a rock star. I suppose every teacher could write a book of memorable quotes. One of my favorites came one morning before classes started, sitting at one of those low tables on one of those tiny chairs when I was flexible enough to do that, when one boy said to his very good friend, "My dad said that one day I'm going to kiss a girl on the lips." There was horror in his voice, and his friend was equally horrified. This is a picture of childhood innocence. It just so happened in my reading and studying this week, I read how Jesus welcomed children, how he warned us never to harm one of these little ones, and
that we all must become like little children to enter his kingdom. Amazing that on his road, with his big, horrific job in front of him, he talked to children and taught us about children. Please use your authority to protect the children in this town, at our pool, and in our library. Thank you.
My name is John Butler. I live at 406 Franklin Street here in Pella. And oh, that we could live by those first two commandments, because that indeed covers all the law and the prophets. The first one that Jesus said, love the Lord your God with all your heart, with all your mind, and with all your strength, is the first four commandments summed up. No, I am the Lord your God, have no other gods before me, no graven images, do not take the name of the Lord in vain, and honor the Sabbath and keep it holy. The transition commandment is honor your father and mother, and I think my parents have been deceased for decades now, and I still think about my actions, and I hope that I'm honoring my parents. The last remaining 5 commandments are the love your neighbor as yourself. And you know those. I don't need to repeat them. So I think what I want to say, I want to be brief here tonight. I've taken up a lot of time of yours in regard to the library situation. I think that we've talked about biblical wisdom. We've heard some of that tonight. We've heard historical wisdom. We've heard some of that tonight. Founding fathers being quoted. Here's a little political wisdom. It's called compromise. At the moment, the library board seems to be completely intransigent about the book. They want to leave it on the shelf, yada, yada. They have never thought about compromising. I would, if I got my way, I would get rid of the book and all the R-rated videos, or at least keep control access. But, as one other man said, we don't all get our way. In between my way and their way, it should be a compromise that there's restricted access to these materials. Think about it. There are many things that are restricted. We don't sell alcohol to minors. We don't allow minors to buy guns. We don't allow minors to go to R-rated movies. And we don't allow minors to drive. Restricted access. What's the big deal? Restrict it. Keep it behind the counter. People that want to see it can still get it at my expense, but it's time to restrict the access. The word is compromise. Thank you.
I'm Judy Janning Reichs, and I live at 309 West Fifth Street. And I'm here tonight to address you as a mental health provider. I've worked with teens for almost 50 years. And I have counseled them through many identity issues. And I have relied on books. I have relied on the library to give them answers to questions. Questions they couldn't get answers from their parents, from their teachers, from their churches. They were in conflict and they were desperate. And so I agree with the library board. We need to keep these resources out there. I'm especially concerned about the mental health concerns of kids dealing with gender identity issues, dealing with sexuality issues. I have lost kids to suicide. And as a mental health provider, there is nothing more painful. So I would ask that those books remain there for the
I remove your microphone because we are broadcasting this live stream so that we can hear on the video. Is that okay?
What are you gonna do with it?
Just hold it so that anybody else that comes up can hold it too and be heard. Is that okay? Yeah. Okay, thank you. All right, once we get it out here, we'll be all right. Oh, I guess it's not very long. My name is Helena Hayes, and I am from rural New Sharon, 1812 Hickory Avenue. And I am here because the group of people that I want to represent are those that use the Pella Pool and the Pella Library and the public facilities and enjoy the events in your wonderful community that do not live in the city and do not live even in the county. There's a large group of people, I think you'd be surprised, a large group of people that come to Pella for your wonderful programs and events and everything that you have to offer. Clearly, your library and your pool and things like that are superb compared to the other communities around here. I am not from this area originally. I came to Central College to attend as a freshman and met and married my husband and have stayed in this area because it is a wonderful place to raise a family. So I just want to ask you that I am also agreeing that I would like to request removal of the book, or at the very least what John mentioned, which was restricted access. I don't understand, to me, why it is that difficult to ask for that, because I feel like it contributes to the breakdown of a moral society. And so that is all I have to say, and I thank you for your guys' time and your contribution to our community. Next.
Thank you for allowing me the opportunity to speak tonight. I actually had a speech already written out. The majority of everything I wanted to address has already been addressed, so I'll keep it brief. How's that, Mr. Bayer?
Do you have a name?
Oh, yes. My name is Michelle Warren. I live at 655 210th Avenue here in Pella. One thing that I want to bring up that nobody has addressed tonight is one very simple thing. This book, Genderqueer, is filled with pornography. It references pedophilia. These pictures are of children engaged in sexual activity. Why do we want to expose our children to this? It's available for anybody at the library who's old enough to carry a library card. That's 5 years and up. Anybody 5 years and up can check this book out. So regardless of where it's shelved, whether it's in the children's section, whether it's in the adult section, whether it's behind the front counter, it doesn't matter where it's at. They can still check it out. That's big. Now, one more thing else that I'd like to point out, and this is also very important. This book, Genderqueer, it cannot be announced on our media. Do you know why that is? The pictures can't be shown either. Do you know why that is? Because the FCC deems it as being obscene. And if anybody on the television were to speak of this book, to show pictures of it, they would lose their jobs. So why on earth does our community, our public library, that is paid for by taxpayer money, why are we allowed to shelve this book, period, when the FCC can't even report it on the news? I'm in support of having this book removed from the library. My children's emotional health is far more important. I understand that there are people who are hurting today because they've been sexually abused. And it's a horrific occurrence, and we're seeing a lot more of it as time goes on. But why allow innocent children to be subjected to the same type of abuse? I absolutely agree that if this is a piece of material that any counselor can use in their guidance when they're helping those who've been abused, then let's keep it in their counselor's possession. And let's keep it out of the hands of innocent children. That's another compromise right there. These counselors can use it in their office space. But to allow it to be freely at the hands of young children is not right. So please use discretion with the innocence of our children. Please. You all do have the capability on the city council here to do something about this. One more thing I'd like to see with regards to our library is that they have an affiliation with American Library Association. What good has this American Library Association done for us? We pay a membership fee to them every year. And this is what they give us in return. You look at me, Brendan, you're shaking your head. We do not need their input. What we need is community input on what our library should be carrying. Not based on some national organization, but based on what the community standards are. So I support us removing our affiliation with the American Library Association. And I want to thank you for allowing me to speak. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Okay. My name is Jill DeVries, and I live at 623 North Oaks Drive. She kind of hit what I was going to say at the end there, but I hope we haven't lost sight of looking into the American Library Association. It takes about 20 seconds of looking on their website to see that they are not a neutral, unbiased professional group that hands out awards. It's a very radical leftist group with an agenda that they are pushing on every library that they're a part of and that they head up. So when I hear that they've received an award by the ALA, that means zero to me. It actually makes me suspicious of what is in the book. So I would encourage you to go to their website and just take a look on. They're very forthcoming on what they think on Black Lives Matter, COVID, transgenderism, any hot topic, they won't be shy about telling you. So let's not pretend that they're a neutral party. Again, I'm going to end with this quote that I feel like sums up. I've heard people talk about we need to love our neighbor. Love, let's see, is truth without love is brutality, but love without truth is hypocrisy. And sometimes love means telling the truth, means saying no. That's all.
I'm Cheryl Graham. I live at 1503 West 4th Street. I had no intention of speaking tonight, but I would just like to remind the council and everyone here that it is a public library, which means it is here to serve the entire community, not just a segment of the population. And I don't see this as being a Christian or non-Christian situation. It is a matter of choice, and I find it really insulting to even consider that someone at the library would allow a child to check this book out. I think that's really insulting. Thank you.
I'm not going to say much, but my name is Karma Ruthven with a C, and I'm at 300 West 5th Street. I I have spoken before, so I'm not going to go into all of it, but I support that the book should be removed and compromise as to where to put it. And I just think it's wrong, and I just support to remove it or put it behind the counter. Thanks.
Good evening, Council. My name is John Shetler. I'm at 1117 Park Lane. I really debated whether or not I was going to come up and speak tonight. I worry about being ostracized, intimidated, labeled a peddler of child pornography for what I might be about to say. However, after reflecting for some time, I realized that there are likely individuals in our community that probably feel this sort of worry or threat every day for no reason other than trying to live out their lives as they best see fit to live them for what makes sense for them. It's for those people that I think need a louder voice tonight, so that's why I'm here. I envision our community as one that should strive to be accepting and welcoming of all people, people that come from all walks of life. One of the places where that feeling of inclusivity and welcomeness should be most prominent is a public facility like our public library. The library should be a place where all members of our community are able to find materials that reflect who they are. It's not the responsibility nor the right of individuals within this community to censor materials or restrict access to those materials from other members of this community. I'll admit there's plenty of books on the library shelves that I would have absolutely no interest in reading, nor would I ever understand why anyone else would want to read those either, but that's not my decision to make. It's up to every individual in our community to decide for themselves what they would choose to access. Furthermore, there are plenty of materials that I would not want my children to have access to without permission from me. I must be very, very clear here. This novel in question is not for young children. It was never intended to be for young children. It shouldn't be accessible for young children to be checked out. It's always been kept in the adult fiction section. If I don't want my children to have access to this or any other book or CD or any other material that's in the library, it's incumbent upon me, it's my responsibility as a parent to ensure that that happens. It's not the responsibility of the library. In reviewing the decision from the Board of Trustees, it's clear to me that the trustees carefully and deliberately considered the request to remove the novel in question from circulation. The decision that they arrived at, I believe, is the correct decision and adheres to the bylaws and the policies by which the trustees are bound to follow. I am concerned about what precedent would be set if the City Council were to overstep or overturn a decision by a city committee that is upholding those standards by which they follow. I urge Council to accept that decision of the Library Board of Trustees and consider the matter closed. Thank you for your time.
Hello, I'm Brad Wilson. I live at 519 Robert Lawn here in Pella. I wanted to thank you for the opportunity to comment tonight, and thank you to your families for putting up with you getting home late tonight. I really don't think I have any sort of unique perspectives or comments that you haven't heard a dozen times already. I just wanted to come up and be an additional voice to say I support the policies, the current policies and decision-making of our excellent public library. Thank you.
Keith Oxbergen, 224 South Street. As we know, the city leaders have in the past, given up control of our library to the ALA. That's nationwide, that's not local. To the ALA and others, they have turned it over to. And our local taxes funded. I don't think that's right. I think our taxes funded. Our local leaders should have input on it. Currently, the library is being run by people not from around here, nationwide and such, or share the values of this town. The values that funded the library are not being shared. Truth be had, I dare say most of you guys on the they're not the values of our leaders in our town here. Porn and stuff like that. I would like to say it's not our values here, or our leaders aren't either. We have chosen you to represent us. So I hope you would represent our values. We have city leaders here that are worship leaders in our churches, heads of HR in our corporations. Currently, the values and the morals portrayed in our library are not what our city leaders would allow in our churches or our corporations. So please don't let it in our libraries either. That would be so hypocritical. I've seen HR remove a lot less offensive materials from our corporations, but yet our library allows it. The same leaders that would remove it from their corporations will allow it to the public. I've heard our Pastor Corber teach us about the effects of porn on people, let alone children, effects on the children. He tells us that just a single view will affect a person's life. It'll affect the mental health. We talked a lot about mental health and how this book helps mental health. Viewing porn destroys mental health on some children. It creates opportunities for pedophiles in the future, this book will. It will cause violence and ruin some lives. Do we want to be responsible for that? You say, well, there's some people that need this book. But there's a lot more people it can hurt. One man mentioned earlier that, get the book on your own if you need it, but let's don't, as a public, give it out to the whole world to ruin everybody. Let's keep it within our needs. Chris Brown, assistant librarian, I believe he is, he shielded his own son from this book when he took it home. But yet it seems to be okay for our sons to be exposed. That's not right. We need to take back control of our library through our own city leaders that chose to represent us. If we took a poll in this town, whether we want to have this porn in our library, and if we showed it to the people who are polling, the pictures, what do you think the results would be? There are several churches in this area that have voted to leave the RCA because of this kind of morals. That it protrudes to our, and we have this morals in our library, but yet the churches have left the RCA. What do you think their votes would be for the library? There's a lot of people there. If we went out in this town, let's do it democracy, take a vote. Do we want it? Do we not want it? I'm sure the overwhelming majority, if the facts were truly explained, would not want it. I dare say you guys wouldn't want it. All these churches, they have these booths at tulip time. Maybe if we keep this book in the library, maybe they're going to have a prayer vigil at tulip time instead, held at our library. Look what happened in Canada when people push and you ignore the people's will for so long. Just saying, it's human nature. You push them too far, things will happen. So as leaders, that's not so long ago, asked to represent us. Represent us. Take back the people's control of our library, in which we funded. Take it back for us, because we funded it to the tune of thousands of dollars. So it should be in you guys' control. because you represent us, and we pay the funds towards that through you, through the library. I'm not asking you to burn books, censor books, and all that mandate things. I'm just asking you to take back control so that we are represented. This stuff going on in our library is publicly illegal everywhere, except libraries and schools have an exemption. And I believe the state is working on that this session to correct that. It's publicly illegal out in the street. This is the same stuff that went on the plains of Sodom and Gomorrah. This is what's going on in our library. What happened there? Who's going to win the spiritual war going on in this town? Don't let us down. Don't let Jesus down, okay? Thank you.
My name is Rochelle Skibout. I live at 2136 Idaho Drive, and I appreciate you taking the time to listen, and I appreciate the time that Lynn and Liz have spent investigating the library policies. And I wasn't going to speak, but I must say I'm a little disappointed that it says we've decided not to make any changes to the collection development policies, and I just would ask you all to reconsider that we simply have a policy against pornography or keep that restricted for minors, because I mean it only takes a 5-minute internet search to find the damaging effects that pornography does have on kids. So not banning books for LGBTQ communities, not banning books for transgender individuals, none of that, but just simply pornography, or just keeping it in an area where kids don't have access to it, just like they can't buy pornography from a store. It's restricted from them there. And I would really also appreciate further looking into the collection development policies as far as like which books are purchased, because I know for myself personally, like when we came back to Pella, I'm telling my husband, we need to spend $500 more a year in books, because the library can't get the books the classic books that I'd like for our kids to read. I really appreciate that the library has changed the policies on interlibrary loans, and they will get interlibrary loan books for free now. But I don't understand why so many of the books that are classic books that many of us would use, that those are gotten on interlibrary loan, and I don't understand why those books can't be purchased. Like, why can't we purchase these classic books? When I know a lot of other people would read them, and I've been told, I've tried to figure this out, and I know that they can only purchase from 2 suppliers, but that doesn't really make sense to me why in this day and age we can only purchase from 2 suppliers, and it doesn't make sense to me why, if we can get them on interlibrary loan, then other libraries are purchasing them. So I don't understand why our local library can't purchase them, and I just personally don't believe that our library does represent our community, and that it is actually a public library representing our community as a whole, because I know I'm not the only one that's faced this frustration with, do your kids just not read those classic books, or do you build your own library and try to come up with the money to buy that many books every year for your kids to read? And so I would just beg you to reconsider some of that, and to look further into the policies, and look further into the policies as far as the books that are weeded off the shelf at the end of the year. Like, why are we spending all that taxpayer dollars to have a library book sale where you can fill a box for, a couple bucks, which I do. But why are we getting rid of those? Like, why aren't those good books? And who's deciding that those are the books we're getting rid of? And I'd really appreciate more looking into that. And I really appreciate your time on this. And yeah, thank you.
Bruce Skibout, 760 218th place. I wasn't going to say anything either. But I guess, I've heard several times, been at several of these meetings, and I've heard that this was an agenda against the LGBTQ community. I really haven't heard that. I guess maybe what you guys ought to maybe look, and I would contend that whose agenda is being fulfilled here. I'm just questioning why this is happening in our community now. I think one may want to search where the agenda is coming from. My guess is that if the illustrations were removed from the book, we wouldn't be here spending a lot of time. As council members, I think you need to consider things like this. The ALA, and I correct me if I'm wrong, I think Pella entered into that agreement. It was either 1972 or 1978, I believe. Look where, that was 50 years ago? Look where our society and our communities have evolved from. And I think that is a completely different organization than what it was. I think there is another agenda there also. So I would strongly urge you to consider looking at that, or at least at the very least letting the people decide. I just see this, one last thing, I just see this, I've sat on that side of the table, and I know how things can progress. And where is this going to stop? It may be 5 years, it may be 10, maybe more, but we are cracking into that area that I think you maybe need to assess. Thanks for your time, folks.
My name is Kathy Veralm. I live at 234 East 10th Street, and I just want to thank Mr. Skibout for what he said. There were some issues there I never thought about, and it is true when there's things progress. And for me, I better not say anymore because our family has been hurt through pornography. And that's all I have to say. Thank you.
Hi, Hannah Graves, 212 Jefferson Street. I apologize, I'm a really bad public speaker, and I don't really have anything really planned. I spoke at the last one. I actually had something really written down, but not this time. So, I recently learned something about Mara Strickler. Strickler, yes. She was the director of public libraries, I think somewhere maybe in Oregon, but she was a speaker for something called Challenging Situations, answering a book challenge in your community. Let me continue. She wrote an article some time ago, Lesbian Pulp Fiction, More Than Just Hot Sex. She goes on to say that she attended a relatively progressive Quaker school where the homo staff were able to identify her queerness long before she was able to acknowledge it. So she considers herself queer. She says, these novels help us, the book, Lesbian Pulp Fiction, she goes on to say how the writing of the characters is really, really important, and their character development is good. These novels help us to get a sense of the tools used to subvert traditional gender and sexual roles by individuals in large and small towns that created today's queer communities full of gender and sexual outlaws. Ultimately, while political actions take place in the streets and radical actions happen between the sheets, the process of politicalization and radicalizations takes place in our own intimate hearts and minds. And for me, that process was supported among the pages of the queer pulp novels of the 20th century in my small, isolated Quaker school in Iowa. So I give you this information on Marla to show that maybe she could be a bit blinded by her own biases and agendas, that she maybe doesn't care about the harmful images that are in the book. She considers herself queer, and she has spoken to what I'm thinking it's probably something to push back against the public who has issues with books. It seems like she's more than happy to come to people's towns and subvert them and push degenerate sexual pornographic things in public libraries. I don't know what kind of research was done when she was picked, but I think that there's a real issue with that, and I really hope that you think there's an issue with that as well. I'm here to say that I want to see her get out, and hopefully the codes, the obscenity codes, will be changed. There's people that are more educated than me doing things like that. I want to mention again the slippery slope. I hope I'm not going over time, but the real slippery slope here is not worrying about books being banned. It's really about this sort of moral rot that we're seeing happen right now in this community. As someone had mentioned before me, he moved here with his family. I just recently moved here a few months ago as well. I moved almost 2,000 miles away from my own family, all of my family, so that my family, my toddler, we could raise her in a community that I thought was, I guess, better than all this. I thought Pella was different. I thought Pella was more conservative. I thought it was, religious, traditional, kind of what I was looking for. And here we are having this issue with this book. I just don't understand why this is still being discussed. It's pornographic images. It depicts a minor. The Plato's Symposium, it literally shows a boy engaging in sexual activities with a grown man, and it's framed in the graphic novel. It's framed as a sexual fantasy that she has. Okay, she's talking about it being a sexual fantasy. A minor, touching privates with an adult, that's disgusting. And that's what the real issue is about. As we've been saying, nobody's been listening previously. This isn't about LGBTQ stuff. It's really just about the images. And we know that kids will look at bad things. We know that they have a tendency to do that because they don't know what's best for them. That's why it's our job to prevent them from getting a hold of certain things. But you know what? I guess, who cares? They're just going to do it. We should just give them free internet access, free porn access, drugs, whatever bad things, because they're just going to do it anyway. So why try to stop them, right?
Okay.
So, okay,
Yeah.
that's, yeah,
I think
thank
it was
you.
very unfair for you to assume that Mara thought certain things. I think, is she here?
She read it out.
Mara here?
This isn't writing,
It's a
Mr.
quote.
Mayor.
She wrote the article.
I know, but
She
you
wrote-
also made some statements that she was trying to put stuff into this community and that. So you
I
shouldn't have done it.
specifically
But anyway,
said that
Mara,
she may well be.
I want to give you an opportunity to defend yourself.
Good evening. My name is Mara Strickler. I'm the director of Pella Public Library. Been there for about 2.5 years. And my goal in being the director books and materials for all the residents of Pella and rural Marion County. After this book, Gender Queer, was challenged, at the request of a community member, we began a deep dive into materials that were added to the library's collection during my tenure, and specifically that were looking at patron requests. And we found that during my time in Pella, we received nearly 2,000 requests from individuals, and we filled, it was approximately 1,700 of them between purchases for the library and interlibrary loan. There were about 100 that were left unfilled. So that tells me that myself and my staff are making every effort to fill the requests from community members for a wide array of materials. This is not about me as a person or an individual. This is about meeting the needs of the entire community as a public library. And that is what I and my staff and the library board are committed to doing. If I had an agenda, as I said before, it is only to get materials, whether they be books or other resources, into the hands of the community members who need them and want them. That is all I'm here to do. Are there any questions for me?
I'll go ahead and stick my neck out. The association with ALA has come up multiple times. Do you mind informing me a little bit more about what that is, why it needs to be there, the benefits,
Sure. So the American Library Association is like any other professional association, and there is a subdivision called the Iowa Library Association. There is the American Library Association provides accreditation to Masters of Library Science programs at schools across the country, but they do not have formal relationships or agreements with any library, including Pella Public Library. They provide support and guidance and foundational professional ethics, but they do not provide funding, and they do not provide instruction to libraries. We as a library and as a library board, as a staff, we are not beholden to the American Library Association, and we do not pay funds or receive funding from them. Very separate organizations. And so I would be happy to help clarify that further, but essentially there is no formal or even informal agreement between the Pella Public Library and the American Library Association.
Okay, thanks. Anybody else want to speak? Otherwise,
There's someone online that wants to speak.
okay. Who's ever online, go ahead.
All right, thank you. My name is Allie Thomas. I live at 1706 Evening Court. And thank you, Mayor Don, for what you said after that previous commenter's speech. And I just wanted to say and reiterate that was incredibly harmful. We can't speak about people like that. If you get to know Mary, you know that she works with the utmost of professionalism. I've been on the Friends of the Library board with her since June of this year, and she does not. Her only agenda is to get materials into the hands of folks who want it. And so please be kind to one another as we speak about things that we all really care about. So in conclusion, I support our library professionals and the policies they have in place. Thank you. Thanks for your time.
Okay. All right, so we'll move into our policy and planning session and have a discussion up front here. So is this the entire presentation?
I think we have a second slide, Mr. Mayor.
Okay.
So,
All right, so go through it, just give us a reminder.
yeah, we'll be brief, Mr. Mayor, and I think it's already been pointed out. Mandy, if we can go back one slide, please. On this, it is important to note, as Mayor DeWard stated, due to the expressions and concerns the city received, the council and actually requested the Library Board of Trustees to further review the collection development policy as it relates to access to mature content by minors. To facilitate those discussions, Mayor DeWard appointed Councilmember Brandon Horst and Councilmember Spore to represent the City Council. My understanding, the council members met with the Library Policy Committee. We also had legal counsel in attendance, and Director Mary Strickler was in attendance as well on the meeting. That input was forwarded to the Library Board of Trustees, and after considering input from the Policy Committee, the appointed elected officials, legal counsel, the board decided not to make any changes to the collection development policy at this time. And so, Mandy, let's go ahead. Before we turn it over to the mayor and council, sir, what we're looking for is just direction tonight from staff. If there's anything that we need to follow up on or do any more additional research on this item for the city council, it is important to note that under the city code, as far as the responsibilities, the Library Board of Trustees is responsible for all library affairs. This includes policies and purchasing of collection materials. City Council's role is in appointing board members, approving the annual library financial allocations are the two main roles. And so, once again, we just wanted to report back what the Library Board of Trustees' position is as far as the collection development policy. They decided not to make any changes on it, and we want to know if there's anything additional that staff needs to do on this matter. So with that, sir, we'd like to turn it back over to the mayor and council for questions.
Do you know when City Code Chapter 22 was adopted?
Mandy, help me out here.
I think it was in the 70s.
Okay.
Long time.
So it's been around a long time. Okay. So I'm interested, Lynn and Liz, our attorney was there, so I'm interested to hear your take from the meeting. We know what the library board decided. So either one of you can give us a synopsis of what was discussed and what you heard, and potentially what our options are related to this.
You want me to start?
Sure.
Okay. Yes, indeed, the attorneys were there. And prior, when the meeting first started, I know that I specifically asked that the book be put behind the shelf. That asked if in good conscience if they could do that, and that was a no. And then we talked a lot about freedom of information and the translation of that. We talked a lot about purchasing policies, and then we circled back around again to the book. And one of the suggestions that could have worked and that was brought forward was earmarking or putting some sort of restriction on children on minors' library cards, so that when they went up to check out this book, that the access would be denied. And the library board said that they felt it was logistically difficult for them to do that. So that did intrigue me a little bit when they said that about the ability for a minor to check out questionable materials. So I did pose this question, and I think it's a very important one, and I repeated it twice. I asked, I said, so are you telling me that if a 7-year-old tried to check out a rated R movie, you would check that movie out to the 7-year-old? And there was the freedom of information line was brought out, and I just simply said, it's a yes or no. Would you or wouldn't you? And the answer was yes, that they would check it out to a 7-year-old. So the attorney then went on, after the card was denied, after there was the admission that yes,
under the Freedom of Information, a rated R movie would be checked out to a 7-year-old. There were 2 more solutions. And do you want me to go into those?
Sure.
Okay.
Yeah, go ahead.
The first solution would be for the city council to hold a referendum of its own, and that referendum would be put on the floor by a city council member, and then would have to be seconded by a city council member and pass with a majority vote, and that special referendum would then put the city council overseeing the library and overseeing the taxpayers' dollars. So that is the easiest, so would be the easiest solution. If the city council denies that, if the city council says, no, we just don't want to do that, or if the city council cannot agree and get a second and cannot get a majority vote, then there is a thing called a referendum by the people. And the referendum by the people is the public would have to create a petition. They would have to get 10% of the signatures of the citizens that voted in the last election. And in the last election, there were just over 2,700 citizens that voted, so you would need just under 300 signatures. That referendum, that petition would be a forced referendum on the part of the citizens. So that's kind of where we're at. A referendum actually is just democracy in action. A referendum is the citizens voting. The referendum would have to have correct wording to it, but those are the last 2 options that I can see. And the most fair options is to take it to the people. And again, what it would be doing would be, if the council did it, the referendum, it would go really quickly. And I'm not sure when the dates would be, but it would give the council the oversight over the $625,000. Is it $625,000 or $500,000?
We can verify
Well,
that.
that's splitting hairs, I guess, at this point. That would give the city council the ability to oversee the taxpayers' money. Isn't that?
Well, right, but we didn't really discuss those options in the meeting that we had.
No, they were discussed. Christine did them at the very end.
Okay, right.
But I think she used a lot of legal terminology.
Sure.
I just took it down to the Queen's English.
Right, sure. I think what we really looked at, and we spent hours in the library with a number of individuals, and I think we vetted a lot of different scenarios. What could it look like? How could we potentially monitor some of these things? What does that look like? What is intelligence, freedom of intelligence? So we went through a lot of different scenarios, and I don't want anyone to think that what we came down to when it says no changes, that it was not thought through. But we also did recognize that we do have a larger community that has a number of needs. Mara shared some of those numbers that we received, and I think Lynn, I'm going to speak for both of us, but we were both surprised at how many of those requests had been fulfilled.
Yes.
Which was great, and so thank you. And I know, Rochelle, I know there's still a few questions I shouldn't actually left, but I'll follow up with you. I got some more information on some of her questions, but I do think that the policies that are in place for a reason, and they do exist, and they've been working. And I recognize that there are people who do not like this book, but the book exists and it is in our library. And one of the comments was as well, and I think you and I both commended the library board for the fact that this book could have been on a children's shelf, right?
And so the fact that this was brought in and immediately moved to
It was
an
on
adult
agenda,
section
Michelle.
Don't interrupt.
No.
is the fact that it is in the adult section. It's already been a move that's been made to try and work with our community in ways to monitor and guide where people should get the content that they want.
I have a follow-up question, how you started this with the Freedom of Information Act. How does that change if it's a board of trustees versus a council?
I think.
I mean, because to me,
Right.
that law is there, it's how it's implemented, and it really doesn't matter who implements it.
Sort of. The difference would be that with the library board, their governing body is the ALA. We don't, the city doesn't hire, the city cannot fire, the city has very little say-so in the library. And so we don't have the oversight over the taxpayers' money that I believe is necessary when we're talking about amounts that large. So the difference is that they go by the ALA bylaws, and I believe we have been given copies of those. So that's their governing body. I mean, it really isn't. We basically give them money, and then they do budget, and they do a good job of budgeting. But as far as oversight, we're very limited. Our hands are very tied, and it's kind of not unlike what we're talking about doing with the ambulance. You know, if the city takes on the ambulance department, we have more say-so, and we will give them more money. But because we give them that money, and it's the taxpayers' money, it's our job to oversee it. So you have the difference in that is you have a body of elected officials. If the referendum would go through, the elected officials then would oversee the taxpayers' money to the library, as opposed to the board.
But what does that change for policy though? And it still doesn't, we would still be in this exact same scenario.
But I think we would have a little more say-so, perhaps.
Did I hear you say that we don't hire the director?
We did an interview and get it down to the final candidates.
So I've got several questions.
Sure.
Mostly I'm interested in what we can do.
Right.
Because people out here are telling me, ban the book, throw the book, do
Right.
this.
Right.
Well, I don't think I have the authority to do
You
that.
don't.
I can't do that.
No.
I hate it when people want me to do something I can't do.
So
I
right.
can't defend that, other than to say I can't do that. So you talked about, the library, of all the departments of the city, the library is different in the fact that it is run by a board of trustees.
Right.
They make the decisions for the library.
Right.
There's two roles that we play in managing the library. One, we appoint members of the board of trustees. Second, we approve a budget for the library.
Right.
That's it. That's the only thing we do. So I'm particularly interested in your discussion about a referendum.
Mm-hmm.
Is the governing law for the library City Code Chapter 22, or is there more state or federal laws that create this board of trustees and govern that way, that the library is governed that way? Do we know? Was that question asked? Is the legal things we're talking about, is it under city code, that city code, or is it a state law? Does anybody know the answer to that question? Mara, maybe? Or Mara, sorry. Apologize for pronouncing your name wrong. Mara?
Thank you. So there is Iowa law that requires how state code is written and administered for library governance. what the referendum refers to would be to the local city code.
Okay.
And I should say, as I said before, the American Library Association, we are not beholden to their bylaws. They are not our governing body. There is no formal or informal association. They are a separate, independent professional organization that accredits library school programs and provides guidance and support, but we are not beholden to them.
Yeah, I wanted to follow up, because Lynn, you said that the ALA was the governing.
Well, that was the
your
reference that
impression.
was made multiple times.
So is that correct or not correct?
They are not a governing body.
Okay.
But they're the policies you follow.
The American Library Association provides support and guidance, including best practice, like the freedom to read, and that informs library policy, but it is not governing, and it is not strict. It is not an organization that we are beholden to, but it is guidance and support to libraries that is in line with federal and state laws.
So at what level does Iowa code enter into library governance?
So Iowa code is informs the city codes that administer libraries, public libraries.
So city code follows Iowa code?
Correct. And I should note our accreditation comes from the state library, which is under the Department of Education. It's totally separate from the American Library Association.
So the establishment of the library board of trustees, the appointing board members, the financial, that's all under city. And this particular city code, for us to change that code would require a referendum.
Correct. And the
The
library.
community would have to vote to change the code. We can't do it unilaterally.
Correct.
Okay.
And the library is already a city department. We are city staff. I interviewed with both the library board and with city staff before being hired. So there is that formality in place.
So I just have one other question. I heard this prior to the meeting. I heard about the discussion about having some policy in place or some logistics in place where a child could not check out adult material at the library level. Not. So I guess my question, I want some more. To me, if a parent goes to the library and says, I don't want my child to check out this material, it seems to me that's an innate parental right to say that. So why is that not possible? If it's just a logistic thing, I just need to be educated as to why that's not possible.
So it is in part logistics, the amount of staff time involved in making those changes to the system to even make that possible. The greater issue is regarding the difficulty with a government entity, meaning the library, entering into a contract with individuals, with parents, to make that limitation. And the fact that we cannot guarantee that consistently, that an individual can come in and grab a book off the shelf and read it in the library. They can borrow a family member's or a friend's card. They can borrow a library material from a friend or a family member and read it that way. And that it is absolutely the parent's right and responsibility to manage and monitor the materials that are checked out by their children, by their dependents, as is determined appropriate within the family, but it is not appropriate for the library to serve as a mediator between the two.
But are there libraries you're aware of that have that policy?
Not that I am aware of, no.
So the biggest concern is, so if I walk in and sign a contract with the library as a parent, say, I don't want my child to be able to check out let's say an R-rated movie. The concern is that if somehow the child were to get it, and libraries that potentially, being we had a contract, now we're talking about lawsuit. And,
That's correct.
okay.
It's true. Is there a rating system on books like there are on movie, for instance?
There is not. In fact, they're designated by age rather than or target audience and genre, but not a rating system. No.
With due respect, your concern about pushback with legal action against that card, this was a suggestion made by our attorney.
Yeah.
Was the dedication of a restriction on the cards. So I guess it didn't bother her, you know.
Yeah, I wasn't saying, I assumed maybe that was part of the reason, so I was just trying to be educated as to why. That's a policy that would be
To me,
hard to implement, I guess I don't.
Yeah. I am just looking for compromise. I am looking for give and take, and I believe John Butler spoke to that, and I looked at that card and I thought, you know, that there is a bit of a beginning, you know, of some sort of moral high ground, and you know, I think it's something that it was given to us by our attorney, correct, Mike?
That's correct.
It was one of her suggestions, and the other two were referendums. So.
The suggestion was a little strong. They gave it as an option, but they did say that there is a risk in implementing it, that there was more risk obviously in implementing it versus not, from a legal perspective.
Strictly another, maybe it's oversimplification, but when I came in to try to get the book, it was kind of on hold for somebody. So I didn't get to go to the Dewey Decimal System and find it. Where does it live once the interest in it has waned, perhaps? Is it grabbable by, what was the age group? We've had several ages thrown out tonight, but, you know, junior high and under. We got tall kids in Pella, I get that, but.
So this particular item would be shelved in the adult graphic novel section, which is its own separate shelving area, not adjacent to either the juvenile section or the young adult section. And I and my staff do a great deal of work helping both parents and caregivers as well as children understand where the materials are in the library that is going to best meet their needs, their reading level, their maturity level. And we certainly don't direct them to the adult collections when it is clear that that is not the appropriate, where they're going to find the best materials for them.
Well, then physically, even what shelf is it on in alpha order or by alpha?
You know, it all depends on the spread of the collection, you know, how much space the books are taking up at any one time. I will say that my staff have been directed to not put any graphic novels, regardless of what permanent collection they're in. They've been directed not to put them on display, not to put them on recently returned carts or materials that might be more readily browsed by youth. They're directed to put them directly into their home location. So.
And do they sit spine out or they sit cover out?
It again depends. The majority of the materials are spine out, but there are some materials that may have the cover facing out.
Anything else? Any other comments?
What comes to my mind is, I'm hearing we have a very dedicated library board. They take the responsibilities very seriously. Why would we want to do that?
but that's our option.
It is
But we
our
try to
option.
come out of these discussions with direction. So just to recap, so understand, in order to change any part of city code, chapter 22, as it relates to the Board of Trustees, it would take a referendum of the community. That referendum can be initiated at the council level with majority vote. So a council member would have to make that motion to have a referendum, and be seconded and passed by the majority vote. The other option on a referendum is for a petition to be brought to us, I assume, with approximately 300 petitions requesting a referendum. So otherwise, if we don't desire to change that code, then our only two oversight possibilities are who the board members are, and we could, whatever we decide to do with funding. Am I?
In this day of technology, I would like to see pursued further the ability to block youngsters from being able to check out. Do they actually check it out, or do they just get their hands on it while they're in the library? Help me out here. What is the concern? Are they browsing the stuff in the library, or are they checking it out?
No, they're not.
The question, I think what Mark's getting at is if we institute a policy where on their library card, if they're a minor, something that they've come to the counter to check out something that's adult only, it would trigger a no checkout. They can't have it. So, but, you know, the ability to browse it in the library, that doesn't really address that.
I would like to add that to this subject matter right now, there in the library is a self-checkout facility available, so children don't even have to go to the front checkout counter to check out materials. They can do it on their own.
Yeah, but if their card had a block on it, it wouldn't make any difference. I mean, with the technology that's out there, you know, is the issue checking out, or is the issue roaming around the library browsing things?
Yeah, I think that's
They're not gonna bring it home to their parents, they're gonna browse it at the library.
part of it.
And I should note, what the attorney say was legally defensible was having basically the ability for a caregiver to mark on a library card what their child may check out, not to have restricted materials in the library, or to restrict what might be browsed in the library.
Sorry, I guess I'm being too logistical. Mr. Clivis, are there a lot of kids dropped off at the library? I know my wife has done that with our herd. Is that happening a lot? Are there a lot of unsupervised minors
It happens
running around
some.
the library?
I would say it's definitely not the majority of youth who visit our library, but there definitely are some. And they know that the most comfortable and best places for them are in the young adult section or in the tween or the youth section. That is consistently where they're directed, and when they come into the library, and that is consistently where they're observed, because that is where they're going to find the materials and resources that they're looking for and that best meet their needs.
I'd like this compromise word thrown around a little bit tonight. Would there be a compromise in the idea of making it policy to not allow unaccompanied minors in the library?
Part of the importance of a public library is being a space where youth can visit unaccompanied at appropriate ages. And we do have an unaccompanied minor policy that addresses that concern.
But do you mind refreshing my memory about what that might be, an unaccompanied minor policy?
Yeah, so it sets the expectation for what ages a child has an adult with them, how when an adult stays with them for programming, and how a caregiver is defined for a younger child. So we do make every effort to address that in the unaccompanied minor policy.
Does that not assuage some of the concerns about the ultra young getting a hold of this and seeing this and being converted to all kinds of different things we heard tonight?
You know, I believe so because I see parents and caregivers doing exactly what they're responsible for doing, is looking after their youngsters in the library and helping make sure that they're making good choices that are in line with what makes sense for their family.
I guess I don't understand why the compromise which has been thrown out there, if you have to have this book in the library, why can it not be kept behind the counter so those young children can't get it and look at it and they can't pick it out? Simple.
Okay, to wrap this thing up, we need, so just for a council member to make a motion to initiate a referendum. Anybody can do that at any time? Does it have to be on the agenda or what?
It has to be on the agenda, Mr. Mayor, and I would also say before, if the council were to do it, probably be something you'd want to make sure legal counsel reviewed.
Yeah.
So.
I just want to make sure we understand.
Would it be worthwhile investigating that a little bit? We've heard differing opinions on that contract law, you know, the book blocking, and so that we get a formal listing the pros and cons of that so that we really know what we're dealing with on that, and possibly find some other libraries. Mary doesn't know any that may be doing that, or if they've considered it, why they decided not to do it. I mean, this has got to be dealt with, I think, somewhere else in this great state.
Yeah, I'm sure we're not plowing new ground.
No.
I think that might be helpful to us, just if we could get some groundwork laid on that before we jump into, because I see that problem doesn't make any difference if it's a board of trustees or a city council. I think those issues will be there no matter what.
But yeah, and just so we understand that, if we do this research and we feel like that's a policy that we should implement, it's still up to the library board of trustees to implement.
Right.
We can discuss it, make suggestions. The only way we can make that decision is through the referendum, just so we all understand. You guys are the ones that have to.
I'm with Calvin. I'd like to see it researched further.
Okay. That makes sense?
Thanks, so, sir.
Thanks, Mara. Sorry. I will work hard to get it right. All right. Thank you all for your participation. I'll entertain a motion to adjourn. Hopkins for, all in favor, please say yes. Opposed, no. Mandy, please call the roll.
Hopkins, 4, Deanne.
Yes.
Rainhorst.
Yes.
DeAnstruck.
Yes.
Carlson.
Yes.
We are adjourned.